You stand in the doorway of the workshop as the last light of evening fades into a dense grey sky. The day has been quiet, without any unusual events to mark its passing, and now the air carries the first cool hint of an approaching rain. In the street beyond the narrow wooden threshold, all movement has ceased. The small row of merchant houses and storefronts stands shuttered, their inhabitants already withdrawn for the night. A single paper lantern swings gently from a pole across the lane, its flame a small wavering spot of orange that will likely be extinguished by the moisture soon. You rest one hand against the frame of the door and look upward, watching the clouds thicken into a uniform layer that obscures any trace of stars or moon. The only sounds are the faint creak of that distant lantern and the slow, irregular call of a night insect from somewhere near the drainage channel, a sound that will vanish as soon as the real rain begins. The first drop strikes the clay-tiled roof above you with a soft tap, followed a moment later by another a hand's breadth away, then a third near the edge. The taps are scattered at first, as if the sky is testing the surface, and gradually they multiply until they merge into a steady, unhurried patter that runs across the roof in one continuous hush. You remain there for a short while longer, letting the change settle, listening to the way the rain begins to spill from the eaves and form a thin curtain of water that separates the workshop from the outside world. The scent of damp earth and wet wood rises from the small patch of packed ground that serves as a front step, and the temperature drops just enough to make the lamplit interior behind you feel warm by comparison. When the rhythm of the rain settles into an even, predictable pattern, you finally step back and turn to the workshop, sliding the wooden door closed with a sound that is low and solid, sealing the night outside. Inside, the room is entirely dark except for the faint glow that edges through the shutter slats, and for a moment you stand in the center of that darkness, orienting yourself by memory. The space is small, no more than 4 tatami mats in size, and every part of it is arranged for a single purpose. To your left, a low wooden shelf is fixed to the wall, holding a collection of folded cloths sorted by softness and use. Next to the cloths are several small ceramic jars with fitted lids, each containing a different grade of polishing powder, some made from powdered stone, and others from finely crushed deer antler or burnt ox hoof. Beside these, a row of small dishes holds oils of different weights, and a shallow wooden tray contains several whetstones of varying grit, each resting on a strip of fabric to protect the shelf surface. Directly ahead, at the very center of the room, stands a full armor stand made of dark, oiled wood, draped with a suit of armor that has been awaiting attention for some days. The armor is not arranged for battle, but for care, with its components hung or propped in the precise order required for polishing. To your right, a low workbench with a slightly worn surface holds a water, a stack of clean cotton pads, and a bamboo basket for used cloths, while the floor beneath the workbench is covered with a thin straw mat that muffles footsteps. Everything is in its place, and you know this without needing to see it. You cross the room with the ease of long habit and reach for the oil lamp that hangs from a ceiling hook just above the workbench. The lighter is a simple iron striker that you take from a small niche in the wall, and when you draw it across the flint, the spark catches on the lamp's wick with a tiny hiss, then settles into a steady, cupped flame. You adjust the wick with a small twist of the control knob until the light is bright enough to work by, but not so bright that it would strain the eyes. A second lamp near the armor stand is lit next, and then a third on the shelf until the workshop emerges from the dusk in warm, trembling pools of amber light. The flames are reflected in the polished sections of the armor in ways that shift and shimmer as you move, giving the room a gentle sense of life despite its stillness. The shadows that collect in the corners are soft-edged and deep, and the rain on the roof now sounds like the quiet murmuring of a faraway stream. You take a moment to roll a thick cotton cushion from a stack near the wall and place it on the floor before the armor stand, positioning it so that when you sit, your hands will be at the correct height for the work. Then you fetch a small wooden stool from the corner and set it beside the cushion, using it to hold a shallow dish of clean water and a cloth. Before you begin any polishing, you look at the armor as a whole, taking in the way the light plays across the kabuto helmet, the mempo face guard, the do chest plate, and the sewed shoulder guards. The metal has a dull, slightly hazy appearance, coated with the remnants of old protective oil that has thickened in some places and thinned in others. The leather parts are dry but not cracked, and the silk lacing, though faded, is still intact and functional. The armor is not a relic of war, but a living object that requires steady, quiet maintenance. And tonight you will give it that care. Your first task is to select a clean cotton cloth from the shelf. You move to the shelf and let your hand hover over the folded squares for a second, then choose one that is large enough to cover your palm, but thin enough to feel the texture of the metal through its fibers. The cloth is a pale, unbleached color with a soft, frayed edge, and when you rub a corner between your fingers, it releases no lint. You carry it back to the cushion, sit down, and place the cloth on the wooden stool beside the water dish. Next, you reach up and carefully lift the kabuto helmet from the armor stand, supporting its weight with both hands, and settle it into your lap with the front crest facing toward the lamp. The helmet is made of iron plates riveted together, with a small flared brim and an opening in the top where a decorative crest would normally be mounted. Tonight, the crest is absent, stored elsewhere, leaving the helmet's crown a simple, rounded shell. The interior is padded with a layer of old fabric that smells faintly of dried persimmon and thyme. You rest the helmet on your knees with a folded cloth beneath it to prevent any scratch from the floor, and then you simply look at it for a while, letting your eyes travel over the surface to find the areas that will need the most attention. The first stage of cleaning involves the removal of the old oil. You moisten the corner of the cotton cloth with a few drops of water from the dish, squeezing out the excess so that the cloth is only slightly damp, not wet. Then you begin at the very center of the helmet's brow plate, pressing the cloth gently against the metal and drawing it across in a single, unhurried motion. The old oil, which has a slightly sticky texture, smears under the cloth and then lifts away, revealing a stripe of darker, unpolished metal beneath. You turn the cloth to a clean section, moisten it again, and repeat the motion, overlapping the first stripe by a small margin. The work is repetitive in the most peaceful way, each stroke a quiet, complete action that requires no thought beyond itself. The rain continues to fall on the roof, its sound filling the silences between your movements, and the oil lamp on the shelf gives off a very faint, intermittent hiss as a droplet of moisture somewhere in the wick evaporates. You work your way from the front of the helmet around to the sides, cleaning the riveted plates one by one, moving the cloth in the direction of the metal grain. The grain is a subtle thing, a series of fine, parallel lines left by the original forging, and following it with the cloth feels like reading a text written in a language understood only by touch. The metal under the old oil is cool and slightly rough, and as you clean it, the surface temperature warms a little from the friction of your motion, though you are careful not to rub so hard that you generate any real heat. The old oil collects on the cloth in thin, greyish smears, and after a few minutes you set that cloth aside and pick up a fresh one from the stack you brought to the stool. The used cloth goes into the bamboo basket, where it will wait until the morning to be washed in the water basin behind the workshop. When the entire exterior of the kabuto has been wiped clean of old oil, you take a dry section of cloth and go over the surface once more, buffing away any remaining moisture until the metal has a uniform, matte appearance. In the lamplight, the helmet now looks less hazy and more solid, its form defined by the clean transitions between the plates. You tilt it slightly, watching how the light slides along the curve of the bowl, and you notice a small spot near the rear where a speck of old oil remains. You dampen a corner of cloth, touch the spot, and the oil lifts away immediately, leaving no trace. Satisfied, you place the helmet back onto the padded stand at your side, arranging it so that it will not roll, and you take a brief pause to wipe your hands on a small handcloth that hangs from your sash. The room is comfortable now, the 3 lamps creating a steady glow that seems to push back against the sound of the rain, though of course the sound continues unchanged. You rise from the cushion and walk to the shelf where the polishing powders are kept, your footsteps making a soft, muffled pad on the straw matting. The jars are all labeled with simple paper tags that have yellowed with age, the ink characters written in a careful hand that is not your own but that of the previous polisher who occupied this workshop many years ago. You lift a jar marked Uchiko and remove the lid, peering inside the fine talc-like powder that has the pale grey color of a misty morning. The powder is dry and loose, and when you tilt the jar slightly, it shifts with the smoothness of a liquid. You take a pinch between your thumb and forefinger and rub it lightly, feeling its grittiness vanish into an almost imperceptible smoothness. This powder, you know, is made from a particular type of stone that was ground and washed and ground again until it became this weightless dust, and it will be used later in the night for the second stage of polishing. For now, you replace the lid and set the jar aside on the workbench, where it will be within easy reach when the time comes. Before you continue with the helmet, you check the condition of the other armor pieces that hang on the stand. You step back to the stand and lift one of the shoulder guards slightly, feeling its weight and examining the silk lacing for any signs of fraying. The lacing is still tight and evenly spaced, the alternating indigo and crimson threads creating a pattern that is both simple and pleasing to the eye. You let the shoulder guard settle back into its place, and then you run your hand lightly over the surface of the chest plate, detecting the same thin film of old oil that you have already removed from the helmet. The chest plate will require the same initial cleaning later, but for now it is enough to know that the oil is there, waiting. You return to your cushion, drawing it a little closer to the armor stand so that you can reach the other pieces more easily without having to stand repeatedly. Sitting once more, you take up the kabuto helmet again, and this time you focus on the interior padding. The old fabric inside is made of layered cotton that has been stitched in concentric circles, and it has absorbed a faint trace of oil from the metal above it. You do not wet this fabric. Instead, you use a completely dry, soft bristled brush taken from a hook on the shelf to gently sweep away any dust and loose fibers. The brush is made of horsehair and is so soft that it barely makes a sound as it moves across the fabric, a whisper of a whisper. You work the brush in slow circular motions, starting from the center and moving outward, and after a minute or two the interior of the helmet looks and smells fresher, the old oil scent diminished. By now the rain outside has intensified slightly, not into a storm but into a thicker, more insistent drumming that makes the walls of the workshop seem to breathe. The sound is pleasant and all-encompassing, a steady background that erases all other noises, and you find that your movements have slowed to match its tempo. You are in no hurry. The night is long, and the work will take as long as it takes. You replace the brush on its hook, and take a moment to just sit on the cushion, your hands resting loosely on your knees, your eyes half closed as you listen to the rain. The armor stands before you, the helmet gleaming dully in the lamplight, and the room is filled with the mingled scents of oil, damp wood, and the faint, clean aroma of the Uchiko powder now sitting open on the bench. A single drop of water, dislodged from somewhere on the roof, strikes the drainage stone outside with a clear, musical plink, and then the steady drumming reasserts itself. After the pause, you open your eyes and reach for the next item you will need, a small ceramic dish of clove oil, which you will use later to protect the metal after polishing. You lift the lid of the dish, and the scent of cloves rises immediately, sharp and warm, cutting through the dampness of the air. You take a clean cotton pad, pinch it with a pair of wooden tweezers from the tray, and dip it lightly into the oil, just enough to saturate the center of the pad without causing it to drip. Then you set the oiled pad on a separate small plate, where it will be ready when the polishing is finished, hours from now. The tweezers are returned to their groove in the tray. The oil dish is covered and you place it back on the shelf alongside the polishing powders, each item in its designated spot. Now you are ready to begin the dry polishing of the helmet. You take a fresh silk cloth, this one cut into a small square that fits comfortably in your palm, and you fold it twice to create a flat, padded surface. The silk is smooth and cool, and when you rub it against the back of your hand, it slides with almost no friction. You hold the helmet steady with your left hand, fingers spread to support the bowl from beneath, and with your right hand you begin to rub the silk cloth in tiny overlapping circles on the brow plate, starting from the center and spiraling outward. The motion is slow and even, a gentle scouring that produces no visible change yet, but that begins to warm the metal ever so slightly. The silk catches on the microscopic ridges of the iron grain, and you feel that texture translated through the cloth as a faint, pleasant rasp. You count the circles without meaning to, the rhythm becoming as steady as the rain, and after 100 circles you stop, lift the cloth, and examine the surface. The metal is now a shade brighter, the beginnings of a deeper glow starting to appear beneath the matte finish. You fold the silk to expose a fresh section and resume the polishing, moving from the brow plate to the side plates, then to the back, covering every part of the helmet with the same patient circular motion. The work is hypnotic, each circle blending into the next, the sound of the silk on iron mixing with the drumming of the rain into a single continuous texture of sound. Sometimes you pause to brush away a few specks of powder that have migrated from the workbench onto the helmet's surface, and then you continue without any sense of interruption. The shadows in the room shift slightly as the oil lamps burn down a fraction, but the light remains steady enough for the fine work. By the time you finish this first dry polish, the helmet has taken on a softer, more luminous quality. The metal now a deep charcoal grey that reflects the lamplight in a gentle diffuse glow. You set the silk cloth aside, flex your fingers a few times to ease the mild stiffness that has settled into the joints, and then lift the helmet with both hands, turning it slowly in the light. The surface is uniform, free of the hazy patches that marked it before, and the grain of the iron is now faintly visible as a series of whisper-thin lines that run like contour lines across the curve of the bowl. You hold the helmet for a long moment, feeling its weight and its coolness, before placing it back on the padded stand with the same care you would use for a piece of thin pottery. The night is not yet half gone, but the first stage is complete. Outside, the rain continues to fall, its sound a steady, unhurried pattern that will accompany you through the remaining hours. The workshop is calm, the lamps burning steadily, the armor stand waiting with its other pieces still untouched. You stretch your arms slowly, roll your shoulders once, and then reach for the chest plate, ready to begin the same patient cleaning process on the next section of the armor. The night deepens by slow degrees, and the rain says nothing but continues its quiet, faithful song. The helmet rests in your lap with the weight of something accustomed to being held, its iron bowl cradled by the folded cloth beneath it and the steady support of your left hand. The oil lamps have burned down a little since you lit them, and now their flames stand tall and still inside their glass chimneys, casting an even, amber-tinted light across the surface of the metal. You have already wiped away the old protective oil, and what remains is a clean, matte grey that seems to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The air in the workshop is cool but not cold, carrying the scent of damp clay from the roof tiles and the faint, spicy undertone of the clove oil waiting on its shelf. Outside, the rain continues to fall with that same patient rhythm, a sound so constant that it has become less a noise and more a texture of the silence itself, broken only by the occasional gurgle of water spilling from the eaves into the drainage channel below. You take a moment to settle yourself more comfortably on the cushion, drawing your knees slightly inward so that the helmet can rest without strain. The posture is one you have assumed countless times before, and your body falls into it naturally, the spine straight but not stiff, the shoulders relaxed. Your hands, which a moment ago were idle, now lift the first tool of this stage, a small square of fine silk, cut from a larger length, that you keep folded in a wooden box on the shelf. The silk is a pale cream color, so smooth that it slips against itself when you try to fold it, and you have to press it flat against your thigh to create a working surface. You fold it once, then twice, until it forms a pad roughly the size of your palm, the edges aligned with a precision that is more habit than necessity. With the pad ready, you rest it on your right knee and turn your attention back to the helmet. The brow plate is where you will begin, the broad horizontal band that forms the front of the kabuto and that will catch the most light when the polishing is complete. You raise the helmet slightly, tilting it so that the brow plate faces upward toward the nearest lamp, and the light reveals every tiny irregularity in the metal, the fine scratches left by previous cleanings, the faint grain lines from the forging, the microscopic pits that are invisible to a casual glance, but clear to an eye that has spent years learning to see them. You lower the helmet again and bring the silk pad to the metal, touching it first to the center of the brow plate with no pressure at all, just a resting contact that allows you to feel the coolness of the iron through the thin fabric. Then you begin to move the pad in tiny overlapping circles, each circle no larger than a fingertip. The motion is slow and deliberate, a gentle scouring that produces a faint, almost inaudible whisper as the silk drags across the microscopic grain of the iron. You work from the center of the brow plate outward, following an invisible spiral that widens with each pass, and your left hand turns the helmet by gradual degrees so that the surface always meets your right hand at the same comfortable angle. The silk catches occasionally on a speck of dust that the earlier cleaning missed, and each time you pause, lift the pad, brush the speck away with a dry fingertip, and then resume without any sense of hurry. The speck vanishes and the motion continues. The texture under your fingers is cool and faintly granular, like the surface of a smooth stone that has been left out in the cold. You can feel the grain through the silk as a series of fine, parallel ridges that run horizontally across the brow plate, a remnant of the hammer strokes that shaped the iron many years ago. The silk glides more easily when you move along the grain and offers a slight resistance when you move across it, and you adjust your circle pattern unconsciously to account for this, spending a little more time on the cross-grain passes to ensure an even finish. The difference is so subtle that only your fingertips could detect it, and they do so without any need for conscious instruction. As you work, your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the circles, each exhale coinciding with the completion of one spiral and the beginning of the next. The rain, too, seems to align itself with this tempo, its steady drumming on the roof providing a background against which the whisper of the silk stands out clearly. Sometimes a gust of wind stirs the rain, making it swish against the shutters like a broom sweeping stone, and then the sound settles again into its even pattern. You do not look up when the wind comes. Your focus remains on the helmet, on the patch of metal that is slowly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to respond to the polishing. After 100 circles, you stop and lift the silk pad to examine the surface. The light plays across the brow plate differently now, no longer absorbed into a uniform matte grey, but scattered in a way that suggests the beginnings of a deeper tone. The metal is still far from any kind of shine, but the flatness has given way to a subtle liveliness, a quality that you recognize as the first sign of the polishing taking hold. You fold the silk to expose a fresh section, since the used portion has picked up a faint grey residue that would only smear if you continued with it, and you return the pad to the metal. Now you shift your attention to the side plates of the helmet, the curved sections that sweep back from the brow to meet at the rear seam. These areas are more difficult to reach because of their curvature, and you have to adjust your grip on the helmet, cradling it against your chest with your left arm, while your right hand works the silk around the compound curve. The motion changes slightly, the circles becoming elongated ovals that follow the contour of the metal, and you apply a fraction more pressure to ensure that the silk makes full contact. The whisper of the silk against the iron deepens a little, taking on a slightly rougher quality as you work across the areas where the original hammering left the grain running in different directions. You continue this way for a long, quiet stretch of time, moving from one plate to the next, working the silk into every corner and along every edge. Where the plates overlap at the riveted seams, you use the very tip of the folded silk to polish the narrow strips of exposed metal, a delicate operation that requires you to slow your movements even further. The rivets themselves are small, rounded heads of iron that sit slightly proud of the surface, and you polish around them carefully, the silk catching on their edges with a soft ticking sound each time you pass. After each rivet, You pause to ensure that no fibers of silk have been left behind, and then you continue. By the time you have covered the entire exterior of the helmet, the silk pad is thoroughly grey, and you set it aside on the wooden stool, adding it to the growing pile of cloths that will be washed in the morning. You flex your right hand, working the stiffness out of the fingers, and then you take a clean cotton cloth to wipe the helmet once more, removing any loose silk fibers or dust that may have settled on the surface during the polishing. The cloth is slightly coarse compared to the silk, and it leaves the metal feeling clean and dry under your fingertips. Now the helmet is ready for the next stage, the one that will begin to draw the deeper glow out of the iron. You reach to the workbench and pick up the ball of soft cotton that you prepared earlier, a length of fabric twisted and folded into a dense, springy mass about the size of a small apple. Beside it, the open jar of Uchiko powder waits, its contents as fine and pale as ground moonlight. You dip a corner of the cotton ball into the jar, touching it lightly to the surface of the powder, and then you withdraw it with a tiny mound of the grey dust clinging to the fibers. You tap the ball once against the rim of the jar, and the excess powder falls back inside with a soft muffled sound, leaving just the right amount embedded in the cotton. Bringing the cotton ball to the helmet, you begin to rub the brow plate with the same tiny overlapping circles you used for the silk. But this time, the sensation under your hand is different. The Uchiko powder acts as a very mild abrasive, its particles so fine that individually they are invisible, and together they create a thin, dry paste that slides between the cotton and the metal. The sound changes immediately, shifting from the whisper of silk to a quiet, rasping hiss that is more textured and granular. It is the sound of stone dust moving across iron, a sound that seems to belong to the deep past, and it joins the sound of the rain outside in a way that feels natural and complete. You work the powder into the metal with slow, patient strokes, replenishing the cotton ball from the jar whenever the hissing sound becomes too faint. Each time you dip the ball, you tap it gently to remove the excess, and then you resume the circles, watching as the surface of the helmet begins to change. The matte grey that covered the metal after the silk polishing is now giving way to a darker, richer tone, a charcoal grey with the faintest hint of a subdued luster. The change is so gradual that you cannot see it happening in real time, but each time you pause to wipe the surface with a clean cloth and inspect it, the helmet seems a little closer to the final goal. The rain, which has been steady for so long, suddenly intensifies without warning. The soft drumming on the roof becomes a rushing, splashing sound, as if a great quantity of water has been released from the clouds all at once. The noise fills the workshop, pressing against the walls, and the drainage channel outside overflows briefly, spilling water onto the packed earth with a series of wet slaps. You look up from your work for the first time in what feels like hours, your hands pausing mid-circle, and you listen to the downpour with a calm, detached attention. The workshop remains dry and warm, the oil lamps burning steadily despite the humidity, and after a few moments you return your gaze to the helmet and resume the polishing. The rain can do as it likes. Your work continues at its own pace. For several minutes the downpour persists, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it recedes. The rushing sound thins out, returning to the steady drumming it was before, and the drainage channel quiets to a soft trickle. The whole episode has lasted only a short while, but it has refreshed the air, and you notice that the scent of wet earth coming through the shutter slats is now stronger, mingling with the dry, stony smell of the Uchiko powder. You breathe it in once, deeply, and then you set the cotton ball aside and pick up a clean cloth to wipe the helmet. The wiping reveals a surface that is noticeably changed. The brow plate, which you've been working on the longest, now shows a deep, tranquil grey that holds the lamplight in a soft, diffuse shimmer. The grain of the iron is still visible, but it has become more refined, the lines finer and more evenly spaced, as if the polishing has drawn them into sharper focus. You turn the helmet slowly, examining each plate, and you see that the transformation is uniform. The same quiet glow spreading across the sides and back. There are no dull patches, no streaks where the powder might have clumped. Only the smooth, even surface that you intended to create. You place the helmet back on its padded stand, positioning it so that the brow plate faces the lamp, and for a moment you simply sit and look at it. The metal seems to have absorbed some of the night's stillness, its glow a calm, silent presence in the warm light. Your hands rest on your knees, the fingers still tingling slightly from the long polishing, and your breathing has become so slow and even that it matches the rhythm of the rain without any conscious effort. The room is peaceful, filled with the lingering scent of uchiko and the soft sound of water flowing from the eaves. After a short rest, you reach for the helmet again, this time to polish the interior rim and the areas around the opening where the crest would attach. These are narrow, awkward spaces that require a different technique, so you take a small finger stone from the shelf, a sliver of fine-grained polishing stone wrapped in a strip of damp cotton, and you work it gently along the inner edge of the helmet. The stone glides with a slightly gritty sound, different from the hiss of the uchiko, and you use short, careful strokes that follow the curve of the metal. The work is slow and precise, and it occupies your full attention for a long, quiet interval. When you are satisfied with the interior edges, you give the entire helmet one final wipe with a clean, dry cotton cloth, removing any last traces of powder or moisture. Then you hold it up to the lamp one more time, turning it slowly, and you see that the metal now possesses a depth it did not have before. It is not a bright shine, but a subdued inward glow, the kind of finish that would protect the iron from rust while keeping its surface calm and dignified. You lower the helmet, place it carefully back on the stand, and allow your hands to return to your knees. The night has moved forward by another quiet measure, and the rain continues to fall outside, its pattern as steady as your own breathing. The uchiko jar sits on the workbench with its lid slightly askew, the cotton ball resting beside it, and the stack of used cloths in the bamboo basket has grown a little taller. You do not feel tired, only deeply still, as if the slow, repetitive work has settled into your bones in the most restful way. In a moment you will begin the next stage, the application of oil that will seal the polish and bring out the final depth of the iron. But for now you remain on the cushion, listening to the rain, letting the quiet of the workshop hold you in its calm, lamplit embrace. With the kabuto helmet now resting on its padded stand, its metal holding a soft, subdued glow beneath the lamplight, you turn your attention to the next piece of the armor. The chest plate, or do, hangs from a sturdy wooden peg driven into the main armor stand at shoulder height, suspended by its own leather shoulder straps. It is a substantial piece, formed of horizontal iron plates shaped to curve around a torso, lacquered in deep russet tones that have faded with age to a dusty umber. The silk lacing that binds the plates together is still intact, though some of the cords are frayed slightly where they pass through the metal holes, and the leather toggles that connect the shoulder straps to the main body are darkened from years of handling. The rain continues its steady rhythm on the roof, while somewhere near the far corner of the workshop a slow, irregular drip has begun. Water finding its way through a seam in the roof gutter and striking the packed earth outside with a soft, patient sound that you have learned to ignore long ago. You rise from your cushion and cross the short distance to the armor stand, your footsteps making only the faintest pad on the straw matting. Standing before the dough, you let your eyes travel over its surface, noting the way the lamplight catches on the areas where the old lacquer has worn thin, revealing the bare iron beneath. These patches have a grey, slightly rough appearance compared to the smoother lacquered sections, and they will need the most attention during the polishing. The leather shoulder straps hang down from the top edge, each one fitted with a small disc-shaped toggle of polished bone that has yellowed to a soft ivory. The toggles are tied to the straps with lengths of silk cord that have been knotted in a particular way, a pattern that looks simple but that requires a careful hand to undo without tangling. Before you can work on the chest plate itself, you must remove these straps and set them aside, for polishing the metal with the straps attached would risk staining the leather or pulling the lacing out of alignment. You reach out and lift the left shoulder strap gently, feeling the dry, slightly stiff texture of the leather between your fingers. The strap is about the width of 2 fingers, its edges rounded and smooth, and it smells faintly of the smoke tanning process used to cure it many years ago. You turn the strap over to examine the toggle, a flat circle of bone carved with a single central hole through which the silk cord passes. The cord is a faded indigo, still strong but no longer as supple as when it was new. And the knot that secures it is a compact, layered thing, a series of loops drawn tight against the leather. You begin to work the knot loose, using only your fingertips and the tips of your nails, since tools would risk cutting the silk. The process is slow and meditative, each loop lifted and eased apart with the smallest possible movements. The first loop resists for a moment, then slides free with a tiny dry whisper of silk against silk. You hold the freed end between your thumb and forefinger and trace it back through the knot, following its path until the second loop loosens, then the third, until the entire knot unravels into a simple length of cord that you coil neatly in your palm. The toggle drops free, and you catch it before it can fall, setting it into a small ceramic dish on the workbench that you keep for exactly this purpose. The dish already contains the small wooden tweezers and a spare cotton pad, and now the first toggle rests there, gleaming faintly. You repeat the process with the right shoulder strap, working the knot with the same patient attention, and soon the second toggle joins the first in the dish. With both toggles removed, the shoulder straps are now loose, attached only by the leather loops that pass through iron rings at the top of the chest plate. You slide each loop carefully off its ring, and the straps come away in your hands, 2 lengths of darkened leather that you set aside on a clean cloth spread on the workbench. The cloth is a square of unbleached cotton, and it will protect the leather from any stray polishing powder that might drift onto the bench later. You lay the straps flat, smoothing out any kinks with a gentle stroke, and then you fold the cloth over them so that they remain clean and out of the way. Now the chest plate hangs free on its peg, supported only by the 2 iron rings. You lift it carefully, using both hands to take its weight, and carry it to your main work area, where a low wooden working stand has been placed beside your cushion. The stand is a simple construction of crossed beams padded with rice straw cushioning designed to hold the curved plate securely without scratching its inner surface. You settle the dough onto the stand with the outer face upward, and the rice straw accepts its shape with a soft, rustling sigh. The lamplight falls across the plate now, and you can see the full extent of the wear. The lacquer, which once must have been a deep, glossy red-brown, has faded to a color like dried autumn leaves, and in several places it has flaked away entirely, exposing patches of iron that have taken on a dull, grayish patina. The silk lacing that runs vertically between the plates is dusty but intact, and you make a note to clean it later with a dry brush rather than any liquid. You take a moment to examine the inner surface of the chest plate, lifting it slightly and peering into the concave hollow. The inside is lined with a layer of old leather that has been glued to the iron, and while it shows signs of wear, it is free of any cracks or loose edges that would need repair. The leather lining has a faint, musky scent, and the glue that holds it has yellowed with time but remains firm. Satisfied that the inner surface requires only a light dusting, you set the plate back onto the stand and reach for the small bowl of fresh water that you prepared earlier. The bowl is a simple ceramic vessel with a plain grey glaze, and the water inside is clear and cool, drawn from the workshop stone cistern just after the rain began. You place the bowl on the stool at your right hand, alongside a folded cotton square that has been dampened just enough to feel cool to the touch. Next, you select the whetstone. The stone you need for this stage is a fine-grained sharpening stone, a rectangular grey block that has been soaking in a shallow tray of water since before you lit the lamps. You lift it from the tray, and water drips from its surface in a slow, steady trickle, the stone itself dark with saturation. You hold it over the tray until the dripping stops, then carry it to your work area and set it on a small bamboo mat that keeps the stool dry. The stone feels heavy and cool in your hand, its surface so smooth that it reflects a faint, blurred image of the lamp. You test its flatness by running a fingertip across the width, feeling only the gentle, even texture of the fine grain, and then you place it beside the water bowl. The wet polishing begins with the first worn patch of lacquer, an area on the upper right curve of the chest plate where the iron shows through in a shape like an irregular coin. You dip your fingertips into the water bowl and sprinkle a few drops onto the metal, watching the droplets bead up and then spread, darkening the iron and the surrounding lacquer. Then you take the whetstone in your right hand, holding it at a slight angle so that its long edge will contact the plate evenly, and you touch it to the wetted surface. The contact is gentle at first, a moment of stillness before movement, and then you begin to glide the stone forward in a long, smooth pass that follows the curve of the metal. The sound that rises from this motion is a low, liquid scrape, the stone sliding over iron and water with a noise like a soft exhale. You draw the stone back, lift it slightly, and then push forward again, each stroke overlapping the previous one by about half the stone's width. The passes are slow and regular, and with each one a thin dark grey paste begins to form at the leading edge of the stone, a slurry of water and microscopic metal particles that collects in a small crescent. The paste has a faintly metallic smell, clean and cool like wet pebbles in a stream, and it thickens gradually as you continue, becoming opaque and creamy. You pause after a dozen strokes, and wipe the paste away with the damp cotton square, drawing it across the metal in one smooth motion that leaves the surface clean and glistening. The lamplight reveals the patch now, and you can see that the iron has lightened slightly, the dull grey beginning to take on a smoother, more even tone. The surrounding lacquer edges are crisp, the polishing stone having ridden over them without chipping, and you feel a quiet satisfaction at this before you dip your fingers into the water again, sprinkle the patch anew, and resume the long, steady passes. The work continues in this way for a long, unhurried interval, the stone gliding back and forth, the paste forming and being wiped away, the metal responding by slow degrees. You move from the first patch to a second one on the lower left, where a series of fine scratches cross the iron, remnants of some past cleaning that used too coarse a stone. Here you apply a little more water, and work the stone in shorter, more careful strokes, watching as the scratches gradually fade and blend into the surrounding surface. The scratches do not vanish entirely, for some are too deep to erase without removing more metal than is wise, but they soften and become less noticeable, merging into the overall texture of the plate in a way that is honest and acceptable. The rain outside continues to fall with its steady, unhurried rhythm, while the drip from the roof gutter persists at its own irregular pace, a soft intermittent punctuation to the longer sound. Sometimes the drip falls in quick succession, 2 or 3 drops landing one after the other, and then there is a pause that lasts long enough for you to forget it, before the next drop falls. You do not look up when the drip comes, nor do you pause in your work. It is simply part of the night's background, a sound that has been there for as long as you can remember and will likely be there long after. When you have covered every exposed patch of iron on the outer face, you turn your attention to the inner surface. This side does not require the whetstone, for it is mostly covered by the leather lining, but the few areas of bare metal around the edges and near the iron rings can benefit from a lighter touch. You set the coarse whetstone aside and select a smaller, finer stone from the shelf, a piece of pale yellow stone that has been shaped into a thin, rounded slip. You moisten this stone with water and work it gently around the iron rings, using tiny circular motions that polish the metal to a subdued gleam without disturbing the leather. The process is delicate and slow, your hand moving with the same patience you would use to clean a fine piece of pottery, and when you finish, the rings have a quiet, silvery glow that stands out against the darker iron. With the polishing complete, you take a fresh dry cotton cloth and wipe the entire chest plate, outer and inner surfaces, removing any remaining moisture and the last traces of the polishing paste. The metal where the lacquer had worn away now shows a smooth, dark grey finish that feels velvety under the cloth, while the lacquered sections, though still faded, look cleaner and more unified. The contrast between the two surfaces creates a pleasing balance, the organic wear of age respected and preserved rather than hidden. You set the cloth aside and lift the chest plate, turning it slowly in the lamplight to inspect your work. The plate feels solid and heavy in your hands, its weight a reminder of the care it has received over many years, and the light plays across its curves in a way that seems to bring the old armor a little closer to its original dignity. You place the dough back onto the padded working stand, arranging it so that the outer face is upward once more, and then you pause to rest your hands. Your fingers are slightly chilled from the water and the cool metal, and you rub them together slowly, warming them with friction. The rain still drums on the roof, and the drip from the gutter still marks its slow, irregular time. The oil lamps burn steadily, their flames tall and unwavering in the still air of the workshop. On the bench the shoulder straps wait under their cotton cloth, and the ceramic dish holds the two bone toggles gleaming softly. The night continues, and you remain seated, letting the quiet settle around you before you begin the next stage of the work, a stage that will involve those straps and the careful process of rejoining them to the freshly polished chest plate. The chest plate rests on its padded working stand, where you left it after the wet polishing, the outer surface now clean and dry, the lamplight tracing the curves where lacquer meets bare iron. The coarse whetstone has been put away on the shelf, its work complete, and the small fine stone you used on the inner rings has been wiped clean and returned to its niche. Now the night has deepened by another quiet measure, the oil lamps still burning with tall, steady flames, their light pooling on the workbench and the straw matting. The rain on the roof continues its patient rhythm, though the drip from the gutter has slowed to a single drop every few heartbeats, a sound so familiar that you no longer notice it unless you pause to listen. The workshop holds the scent of wet stone and damp clay, with a faint undernote of the clove oil still waiting in its dish on the shelf. You rise from your cushion, taking a moment to stretch your arms slowly upward, feeling the mild tightness in your shoulders ease. Your hands, still cool from the earlier water, have warmed again, and you flex your fingers a few times to prepare them for the finer work ahead. Crossing to the shelf where the polishing stones are kept, you scan the row of racked bundles and select a specific one that has been waiting for this stage. It is a natural Japanese finishing stone, a dense grey block about the length of your hand and the width of 2 fingers, wrapped in a strip of old cotton to protect its surface when not in use. You unwrap it carefully, folding the cotton and setting it aside, and the stone emerges in the lamplight, its color a deep, muted slate with subtle streaks of darker mineral running through it like faint clouds. Its surface is perfectly flat and smooth to the touch, cool and slightly waxy, and it carries the faint, clean smell of mountain stone that has been shaped by water over centuries. You carry the stone to your work area and place it on a small bamboo mat next to the water bowl. Then you take up the water ewer and add a few fresh drops to the bowl, swirling them to ensure the water is cool. The finishing stone does not require soaking like the coarse stone, only a light moistening before each use. You dip your fingertips into the bowl and sprinkle a small amount of water onto the stone's surface, watching the droplets spread into the fine pores and darken the grey to near black. You then shake the excess water from your hand and seat yourself once more on the cushion, drawing the low working stand with the chest plate closer, so that the work is directly in front of you. The rice straw padding cradles the dough securely, its curved form now a familiar presence under the lamplight. Before you begin, you take up a clean cotton rag from the stack on the stool, fold it into a square, and place it within easy reach. The rag will be used to wipe away the slurry that will soon form. You also have a fresh square of silk folded nearby for the final buffing after the stonework. Everything is in order, the arrangement as familiar as the rhythm of the rain. You then lift the finishing stone, holding it with both hands for a moment to feel its weight and balance, your thumbs resting on the top edge. The stone's surface is now damp and cool, ready to meet the iron. You touch the stone to the upper portion of the chest plate, on an area where the lacquer has worn away to expose a broad sweep of bare metal, and you begin the first pass. The motion is a long, steady glide from left to right, following the natural curve of the plate, the stone moving as if it were a boat on a slow current. The sound that rises is not the gritty scrape of the coarse whetstone, but a much softer note, a low, smooth exhale that blends with the rain outside. You draw the stone back without lifting it, then push forward again, overlapping the previous track by half the stone's width. The pressure you apply is light and even, guided by years of practice, your hands adjusting without any conscious thought, letting the stone's own weight do most of the work. As the passes accumulate, a dark grey slurry begins to form at the leading edge of the stone, a mixture of water and the finest particles of iron lifted from the surface. The slurry has a creamy consistency, opaque and smooth, and it gathers in a thin crescent that moves with the stone. The scent of the slurry is clean and mineral, a cool, wet stone smell that fills your breathing with the essence of the polishing. You continue the passes 10 strokes, then 20, the sound never varying, the motion never hurrying. The rain on the roof seems to answer the stone's exhale with its own steady drumming, the two sounds weaving together into a single texture of quiet industry. After 30 strokes, you pause and lift the stone, placing it on the bamboo mat, and reach for the cotton rag. You wipe the slurry from the metal in one smooth, curving motion, turning the rag to a clean section as you go. The rag comes away dark grey, and the surface beneath, now visible, has shifted ever so slightly. The dull grey of the iron has begun to yield to a deeper tone, a subdued lustre that holds the lamplight rather than absorbing it. The change is almost imperceptible, a transition so gradual that only by comparing the freshly wiped area to the untouched sections could you confirm that any progress has been made. You fold the rag to a fresh spot, set it aside, and moisten the stone again with a few drops of water, then return it to the plate. Now you shift your attention to a different part of the chest plate, the lower left quadrant, where a series of fine-grained lines run diagonally across the iron. You adjust the angle of the stone slightly so that its long edge aligns with the grain. The pass is now moving in a gentle diagonal that follows the forged structure of the metal. The sound deepens a little, the exhale becoming more resonant as the stone tracks along the grain ridges and the slurry builds more quickly, turning darker. You work this section with the same unhurried rhythm, counting the strokes only by the quiet repetition of the motion, and your mind drifts into a state of calm focus where nothing exists beyond the stone, the metal, the slurry, and the sound of the rain. The muscles in your forearms begin to register a slight ache, a dull warmth that comes from the sustained, unbroken movement. It is not a pain, but a gentle reminder of the work, a sensation you have felt many times before and have come to associate with the deep hours of the night. You pause to let your arms rest, placing the stone on the mat and flexing your fingers, rolling your wrists in slow circles. The ache eases quickly, but you know it will return as the polishing continues, and you accept this as part of the rhythm. You take the opportunity to wipe the plate again, the rag now quite soiled, and you exchange it for a fresh one from the stack. The freshly polished iron catches the lamplight in a soft, dark shimmer, the grain lines visible as delicate parallel threads that seem to hold the history of the forging within them. You return the stone to the plate, moistening it once more, and this time you work on the side sections where the curvature becomes more pronounced. Here you must angle the stone to match the compound curve, using shorter, more careful strokes that follow the contour as if tracing the outline of a gentle hill. The slurry builds in small crescents that you wipe away frequently, each wipe revealing a surface that inches closer to the final finish. The lamplight picks out the faintest variations in the iron's grain, tiny swirls and waves where the hammer strokes diverged centuries ago, and you notice these details with a quiet appreciation, acknowledging the work of the long-ago smith who shaped the plate. The stone glides over these variations without pause, its fine grit smoothing the surface without erasing the character. Time passes in this manner, measured only by the progression of the polishing and the slow accumulation of dark slurry on the rag. The rain outside has settled into a soft, constant patter that neither rises nor falls, a background presence that wraps the workshop in a cocoon of sound. The drip from the gutter has stopped altogether, the seam perhaps having sealed itself with moisture, and now only the steady drumming on the roof remains. You work through the entire outer face of the chest plate, section by section, moving the padded stand as needed to keep the work area within comfortable reach. The ache in your forearms returns and stays, a warm, dull companion to the slow rhythm, and you pause more frequently now to let your hands rest, taking the time to wipe the surface and inspect the progress. During one such pause, a distant sound cuts through the rain, so faint that you might have imagined it. It is the low, resonant tone of a temple bell, sounding once from somewhere far across the town. The note is deep and round, muffled by the wet air and the layers of cloud, and it marks the hour without demanding any acknowledgement. You lift your head, listening as the tone fades into the rain, leaving behind only the memory of its vibration. The bell means that the night has passed another milestone, but you do not count which one. The hour matters less than the work at hand. You lower your gaze back to the chest plate, and after a moment of stillness, you pick up the stone and resume the polishing. Now you turn your attention to the edges of the plate, the narrow rims where the iron folds over to form the top and bottom borders. These areas are more difficult to reach, requiring the stone to be held at a precise angle to avoid contacting the silk lacing that runs nearby. You use the corner of the stone, working it in tiny, careful strokes along the rim, the sound becoming a very quiet, high-pitched whisper. The slurry here is scant, only a faint dark smudge that you wipe away with the tip of the rag. The metal along the edges takes on a clean, crisp appearance, the transition between the polished iron and the worn lacquer becoming sharp and defined. You work your way around the entire perimeter, taking your time, ensuring that no spot is missed. When the edges are complete, you set the finishing stone aside on the bamboo mat and take up a smaller fingerstone, a thin sliver of the same material that has been shaped to fit into tight corners. With this, you polish around the iron rings at the top of the chest plate, the places where the shoulder straps will reattach. The rings are small, their inner surfaces dark with old oil residue, and the fingerstone reaches into these recesses with tiny circular movements. The sound is a soft, gritty whisper, and you pause often to wipe the rings with the corner of the rag, revealing a subdued, silvery gleam that contrasts with the deeper grey of the plate. The work is delicate and slow, and it occupies you for a long interval, your back bending slightly forward, your hands steady and precise. At last, you set the fingerstone aside and take up the fresh silk square. The final stage of this polishing session is the dry buffing, a light, gentle pass over the entire chest plate to remove any remaining slurry residue and to bring the surface to a uniform, satin-like calm. You fold the silk into a pad, as you did for the helmet, and begin at the top of the plate, moving in long, sweeping strokes that follow the horizontal curve. The silk glides with a soft, frictionless whisper and the metal responds by taking on a deeper, more settled glow. The transformation is no longer imperceptible. The chest plate now holds the lamplight in a tranquil dark shimmer, the grain lines visible but refined, the lacquered sections looking richer against the polished iron. You buff the entire outer face, then the edges, then the inner surface where bare metal shows, until every part of the chest plate has been touched by the silk. The ache in your forearms has settled into a warm, heavy feeling, and your hands are slightly stiff, but the work is done. You lay the silk pad on the stool, take up the chest plate with both hands, and hold it up to the lamp, turning it slowly. The light washes across the surface in a smooth, unbroken wave, revealing no dull spots, no streaks, no patches where the slurry might have been missed. The chest plate has become once again a dignified object, its age respected, its integrity restored, to a quiet, inward glow. You place the chest plate carefully back onto the armor stand, hanging it from its peg, and step back to view it alongside the helmet. The two pieces now share the same tranquil finish, the same dark grey shimmer that seems to absorb the lamplight rather than reflect it harshly. The workshop is quiet except for the rain, which continues its patient song, and the oil lamps burn on, their flames unwavering. You stand for a moment, letting your arms hang at your sides, feeling the tiredness in your muscles as a pleasant, honest fatigue. The night is deep, and there are still other pieces of the armor waiting, but for now you allow yourself a small rest, a long, slow breath that mingles with the scent of stone and rain before you turn to the next task. The polishing stones rest now on their bamboo mat, the fine grey finishing block set beside the smaller finger stone, both wiped clean of slurry and returned to their waiting state. You have moved the chest plate from the padded working stand and hung it once more from its peg on the main armor frame, but you are not yet finished with it, because the most careful part of the work is still to come. This is the inspection, the slow, deliberate examination that separates a good polish from a merely adequate one, and it requires a different kind of attention than the broad, rhythmic strokes of the stone. The rain continues to fall outside the workshop, its sound a steady, unhurried presence that has become so woven into the night that you would notice only its absence, and the oil lamps burn on with their tall, unwavering flames, casting a warm amber glow across the room. The scent of the workshop has shifted subtly. The cool, mineral smell of the slurry has faded, replaced by the dry, clean scent of cotton rags and the faint, persistent spice of the clove oil, still sealed in its ceramic bottle on the shelf. You reach for a square of soft deerskin that lies folded on the corner of the workbench, a piece of material you reserve specifically for inspection because its texture reveals even the slightest irregularity in the metal. The deerskin is pale tan in color, with a souded surface that feels like a fine, dry powder under your fingertips, and it has been cut into a shape that fits comfortably in your palm. You take it up and rub a corner between your thumb and forefinger, feeling the gentle, velvety resistance. Then you fold it once to create a pad that will glide smoothly over the iron without scratching. With the deerskin in hand, you step closer to the armor stand and unhook the chest plate, carrying it to the brightest lamp in the room, the one that hangs directly above the workbench on a short chain. You hold the plate in both hands, its weight settling into your palms, and tilt it so that the outer face catches the full glow of the flame. In this light, every detail of the metal becomes visible. The lamplight flows across the curved surface in a warm, even wash, revealing the subtle grain lines that run through the iron, the edges of the worn lacquer and the faint polished shimmer that you have worked to achieve. You begin to rotate the plate very slowly, turning it through a full circle in one direction, then back in the other, your eyes moving across the metal in a systematic pattern that starts at the top rim and works downward. The deer skin waits in your left hand, ready to touch any spot that catches your attention. The room is quiet, but for the rain, and your breathing is slow and shallow, your focus entirely on the surface before you. As the plate turns, you notice how the lamplight behaves when it strikes different areas. On the upper curve, where the polishing was most thorough, the light slides without interruption, a smooth, continuous gleam that tells you the surface is even and free of defects. On the side sections, where the curvature made the stone work more challenging, the light breaks slightly, scattering into a pattern that you examine more closely by bringing the plate nearer to the lamp and tilting it at a sharper angle. Here you see a very faint haze, a patch no larger than a thumbprint, where the polishing has left a microscopic roughness that catches the light differently. It is the sort of imperfection that an untrained eye would never notice, but you see it immediately because you have been trained to see it, and you know that it will only grow more apparent once the oil is applied. You set the chest plate back onto the padded working stand, outer face upward, and you touch the hazy patch with the tip of the deerskin, rubbing it in a tiny circle to confirm what your eyes have told you. The deerskin drags ever so slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible resistance that tells you the metal is not yet fully refined. Without any sense of frustration or hurry, you go to the shelf and retrieve the small finger stone, the same thin sliver of finishing stone you used earlier around the iron rings. It is still slightly damp from its previous use, and you moisten it with a single drop of water from the bowl, then return to the chest plate and seat yourself on the cushion. You locate the hazy patch again by tilting the plate toward the lamp, and you touch the finger stone to the exact center of the imperfection, beginning a series of tiny, patient circles that cover the area with the precision of a brushstroke. The stone's sound is a very quiet, high-pitched whisper, so soft that the rain nearly drowns it out, and the slurry that forms is minuscule, a mere smudge of dark gray that you wipe away after every dozen circles to check your progress. You work the spot with complete attention, adjusting the pressure and the angle of the stone by instinct, feeling the roughness diminish through the tool's vibrations. After several minutes, you wipe the area one final time with the deerskin and tilt the plate toward the lamp, and now the light flows across the spot without any break or scatter. The haze is gone, and the metal matches the surrounding surface perfectly, the grain lines continuous and undisturbed. You do not stop there, because a thorough inspection means examining every part of the chest plate, not only the obvious areas. You turn the plate over and inspect the inner surface, the sections of bare metal around the edges and near the rings, using the deerskin to feel for any rough spots that your eyes might miss. The deerskin glides smoothly across the iron, encountering nothing but the even, velvety finish you intended. You check the edges themselves, running the deerskin along the top and bottom rims, and then you examine each of the iron rings holding the plate close to the lamp to peer into their inner curves. The rings show a clean, subdued gleam, free of any residual slurry or oil, and you are satisfied. The final wipe down comes next, and for this you select a fresh lint-free cloth from the stack, a square of finely woven cotton that has been washed and dried many times until its fibers are soft and compact. You pass this cloth over the entire outer face of the chest plate in long sweeping motions that follow the horizontal grain, turning the cloth frequently to expose clean sections. The cloth picks up nothing visible, no trace of slurry or dust, only the faintest suggestion of dark grey that could be a shadow or could be the last microscopic particles of iron lifted from the surface. You then wipe the inner surfaces, the edges and the rings, until every part of the plate has been touched by the clean cloth. The metal now has a uniform, matte velvet appearance, its tone a deep charcoal grey that seems to hold the lamplight within itself rather than on its surface. Now you are ready for the oiling, the stage that will seal the polish and bring out the final depth of the iron. You set the lint-free cloth aside and rise from the cushion, moving to the shelf where the small ceramic bottle of choji oil waits. The bottle is a modest thing, unglazed on the outside with a fitted cork stopper that is darkened with age, and it sits in a shallow dish to catch any drips. You lift it carefully, feeling the cool, slightly rough texture of the ceramic, and carry it to the workbench. Beside it, you place a clean cotton pad, a pair of wooden tweezers, and a small ceramic plate that will serve as a resting place for the oiled pad. The arrangement is precise and deliberate, each item positioned exactly where you will need it. You remove the cork stopper from the bottle, and immediately the scent of clove rises into the air, a warm, spicy fragrance that fills the workshop with a sudden sweetness. The scent is strong but not harsh, rich with the deep, aromatic notes of the clove buds that were steeped in the oil, and it mingles with the dampness of the rain-soaked air to create a smell that is both comforting and invigorating. You tip the bottle slightly and pour a small amount of the oil onto the ceramic plate. A pool no larger than a coin, its color a pale golden amber that catches the lamplight. The oil has a silky consistency, and it spreads slowly across the plate, releasing more of its scent as it warms to the room's temperature. You pick up the wooden tweezers, a simple tool made of 2 slivers of bamboo bound at one end with a strip of cotton cord. With the tweezers, you grasp the clean cotton pad, pinching it at one corner, and dip the center of the pad lightly into the pool of oil, letting it absorb just enough to become saturated without dripping. The oil soaks into the cotton with a slow, steady spread, turning the white fibers a pale golden color. You lift the pad from the oil, hold it over the plate for a moment to let any excess drain back, and then you are ready. The chest plate waits on its padded stand, and you seat yourself before it, the oiled pad held delicately in the tweezers. You touch the pad to the upper right corner of the plate at the very edge of the metal and begin to move it in a single continuous stroke that follows the horizontal curve of the armor. The oil transfers from the cotton to the iron in a microscopically thin layer, so thin that it is almost invisible, its presence detectable only by the way the metal immediately deepens in tone, shifting from matte charcoal to a tranquil dark shimmer. The scent of clove intensifies as the oil spreads, rising from the metal in a soft aromatic wave, and you breathe it in without distraction, your focus remaining on the motion of the pad. You work the oil across the entire outer face of the chest plate with the same slow sweeping strokes, always moving in the direction of the grain, each pass overlapping the previous one by a small margin. The tweezers allow you to apply the lightest possible pressure so that the oil is laid onto the metal rather than rubbed into it, forming a protective film that is barely there and yet complete. The pad glides without resistance, and the metal responds by taking on a deeper, richer character. The dark grey of the iron, now warmed by the oil, into something that approaches the quiet lustre of aged silver, though without any hint of brightness. The lamplight catches the oiled surface in a smooth, unbroken wave, and the grain lines of the forging stand out more clearly than before, each one a fine dark thread in the tapestry of the iron. When the outer face is fully oiled, you turn the plate over and apply the same thin layer to the inner surfaces, the bare metal around the edges and the rings. The scent of clove fills the workshop now, a warm enveloping presence that seems to push back against the cool dampness of the rain. You work slowly and carefully, the tweezers steady in your hand, and the cotton pad gradually loses its golden stain as the oil is transferred to the metal. When the pad becomes too dry to spread evenly, you dip it again into the pool on the ceramic plate, just a touch, and continue. At last every part of the chest plate has been oiled, and you set the tweezers aside, placing the used cotton pad on the ceramic plate to be dealt with later. You take up a fresh, dry cotton pad with your fingers, not the tweezers, and you gently buff the entire surface of the chest plate with light, circular motions, removing any trace of excess oil that might have pooled in the grain or along the edges. The buffing brings the surface to an even, satin-like calm, the dark sheen deepening without becoming glossy, the metal achieving the exact finish that you have been working toward all night. It is a finish that protects the iron from rust while allowing it to breathe, and it will last for many months before needing to be renewed. You lift the chest plate with both hands and hold it up to the lamp one final time, turning it slowly, and you see that the work is good. The oiled iron has a depth to it that the dry metal lacked, a quiet, settled glow that seems to come from within. The lacquered sections, still faded but now clean and unified, contrast harmoniously with the polished metal, and the overall appearance of the chest plate is one of dignified age, respected and preserved. You place the plate back onto the armor stand, hanging it from its peg so that it faces the room, and you step back to look at it alongside the helmet. The two pieces now share the same tranquil finish, the same dark shimmer, the same faint scent of clove oil that rises from their surfaces and mingles with the damp air. The rain continues to fall outside, its steady drumming on the roof unchanged, the sound a constant, faithful companion to the night's work. You stand for a long moment in the center of the workshop, your hands resting at your sides, the mild ache in your forearms, now a warm, pleasant reminder of the hours that have passed. The oil lamps burn steadily, their flames reflected in the polished surfaces of the armor, and the room is quiet and still. You take a deep breath, letting the scent of clove oil and rain fill your lungs, and then you exhale slowly, your body relaxing into the calm of the moment. The chest plate is done, its inspection and oiling complete, and now it waits in the lamplight while the night continues on its slow, patient course toward the morning that is still far away. The chest plate now hangs from its peg on the main armor stand, its oiled surface holding the lamplight in a deep, tranquil shimmer, the scent of clove still lingering in the air around it. You turn from the stand and let your gaze move across the remaining pieces of the armor, each one waiting in its turn. Your attention settles on the shoulder guards, the sword, which rest on a low wooden rack near the wall, two matched sets of horizontal lames suspended from broad leather panels by rows of silk cord. They have been untouched since you began the night's work, and now they require the same patient care that you have already given to the helmet and the chest plate. The rain outside continues its steady, unhurried rhythm, the sound so constant that it has become less a presence than an absence of silence, while the oil lamps burn with their tall, unwavering flames, and the workshop holds its quiet warmth around you. You walk to the rack and lift the first shoulder guard with both hands, feeling its weight settle into your palms. It is a substantial piece, broader at the top, where it would attach to the shoulder strap and tapering gradually toward the bottom, the individual metal lames overlapping like the scales of a resting fish. The lames are made of iron, each one shaped into a gentle curve to fit the contour of an upper arm, and they are laced together with silk cord in a pattern of navy blue and deep crimson that has faded over time to softer, more muted shades. The silk is still strong, though a fine layer of dust has settled into the cords, dulling their colors. The leather backing panel is dark and stiff, its edges worn smooth, and the uppermost lame is wider than the others, forming a small protective cap that would cover the point of the shoulder. You carry the shoulder guard to your main work area and place it gently on the straw matting beside your cushion, then return for the second one, setting it down parallel to the first so that they form a matched pair, ready for the methodical work to come. The lamplight falls across them evenly, and you can see the differences between the two guards. Subtle variations in the wear patterns on the metal, a slight difference in the fading of the silk on the left guard compared to the right. These variations are part of the armor's history, and you note them with a quiet, accepting attention, knowing that your work will preserve rather than erase them. Before you begin any polishing, you prepare the workspace. You rise and go to the shelf, where a thin cotton tray, a shallow wooden frame stretched with unbleached fabric, leans against the wall. You bring this to your work area and lay it flat on the floor beside your cushion, its surface clean and smooth. The tray will hold the individual lames once you have detached them from the silk suspension, keeping them organized and preventing any mix-up in the order of reassembly. Next, you take a small ceramic dish of fresh water, a stack of clean cotton squares, and a fine bristle brush made of soft horsehair, arranging them on the wooden stool at your right hand. The brush will be used to dust the silk cords before you handle them, and the water and cotton squares are for the initial cleaning of the metal lames. Everything is placed within easy reach, the arrangement as familiar as the rhythm of the rain. You seat yourself on the cushion and take up the first shoulder guard, the left one, resting it across your knees with the outer face upward. The leather backing panel is attached to the lames by the silk lacing, which passes through small holes punched in the metal and then through corresponding holes in the leather, creating a flexible suspension that allows the lames to shift and slide against one another. The lacing is knotted at the back of the leather panel in a series of small tight bows, each one securing a vertical row of cords. You turn the guard over carefully, examining the knots, and you see that some of them have loosened slightly over time, while others remain as tight as the day they were tied. You begin the process of detachment with the uppermost lame, the broad shoulder cap. The silk cord that holds it is threaded through 4 holes, 2 on each side, and the knots at the back are simple loops that can be worked free with patience. You use your fingertips to ease the first knot apart, lifting one loop and then the other, the dry silk rustling softly against itself. The knot comes undone without resistance, and you draw the cord carefully out of the leather hole, laying it across the tray in a loose coil. The cord is long enough that you do not need to pull it fully free of the lame, only enough to release the leather, and you keep it attached to the metal so that the threading pattern remains clear for reassembly. You repeat the process with the second knot, then the third and fourth, until the uppermost lame is free of the leather backing. You lift it gently, supporting its weight with your palm, and place it on the cotton tray, aligning it carefully with the edge, so that the first lame occupies the topmost position. The second lame is attached in the same way, though its silk cords pass through a different set of holes and are laced in a pattern that alternates with the cords of the lame above. You study the lacing for a moment, tracing its path with your eyes, and then you begin to work the knots free, your fingers moving with the same slow, patient precision. The dry silk makes a faint, papery sound as it slides through the leather, and the dust that has settled into the cords rises in tiny, invisible puffs, carrying a faint, ancient smell of old fabric and time. You place the second lame on the tray directly below the first, maintaining the order exactly, and then you continue to the third lame, then the fourth. The shoulder guard contains 17 lames in total, each one slightly smaller than the one above it, creating the tapered silhouette. You work your way down through the rows, detaching each lame in turn, the process becoming a steady, meditative rhythm. The knots at the back vary slightly in tightness, some releasing easily while others require a little more coaxing, and you adjust your touch accordingly, always choosing patience over force. The silk cords, once freed, coil onto the tray in a series of soft indigo and crimson loops, and the lames accumulate in a neat, orderly column, their metal surfaces waiting to be cleaned. When the last and smallest lame is detached, you set the empty leather backing panel aside on the mat, and you take up the right shoulder guard to begin the same process. This guard is identical in construction to the left, but the silk has faded a little more on the outer face, the crimson cords bleached by sunlight to a pale, dusty rose. The lames themselves show the same wear, a thin film of old oil and a scattering of faint scratches that catch the lamplight. You work the knots free with the same unhurried care, your fingers moving through the familiar motions, and soon the second set of 17 lames joins the first on the cotton tray, the two columns lying parallel like the ribs of some quiet, metallic creature. With all 34 lames now arranged before you, you pause to rest your hands. The work of detaching the silk has taken time, and your fingers feel the mild, warm ache of sustained fine movement. You flex them slowly, rubbing your palms together, and you take a moment to look at the tray, the orderly rows of metal pieces, the coiled silk cords in their alternating colors. The lamplight catches the edges of the lames, creating a soft, linear gleam that runs the length of the tray, and the rain outside continues its steady drumming, the sound a calm, unbroken thread that weaves through the silence. The first stage of cleaning the lames is a dry dusting, and for this you use the horsehair brush. You pick up the first lame from the left guard, the broad shoulder cap, and hold it over the tray, its outer face downward. The brush is soft and full, its bristles pale and flexible, and you sweep it gently across the metal in light, feathery strokes that lift away the loose dust without disturbing the surface. The dust falls in a fine, invisible drift onto the tray, and you turn the lame over and brush the inner face as well, then the edges, using the very tip of the brush to reach into the corners. The sound of the bristles on the iron is a soft, rustling whisper, barely audible beneath the rain, and the motion is repetitive in the most soothing way, a quiet, mindless rhythm that occupies your hands while your thoughts settle into stillness. You brush each lame in turn, working down the column, and then you repeat the process with the right guard's lames until all 34 pieces have been dusted. The metal now looks cleaner, but still carries the thin film of old oil, and the next step will remove that oil and prepare the surface for polishing. You take up a clean cotton square, moisten it lightly with water from the dish, and squeeze out the excess until the cloth is only slightly damp. Then you pick up the first lame again and wipe its outer face with a single smooth stroke that follows the curve of the metal. The old oil lifts onto the cloth in a faint grey smear, and the iron beneath emerges slightly darker and cooler. You turn the cloth to a clean section and wipe the inner face, then the edges, and then you place the cleaned lame onto a fresh dry cloth spread on the mat beside the tray. The cleaned lames will rest there until all of them are ready for polishing. You continue the wiping process down through the rows, each lame receiving the same careful attention, the damp cloth lifting away the old oil, the dry iron emerging with a matte grey appearance that reminds you of the helmet and chest plate at the beginning of their own journeys. The work is quiet and rhythmic, the cloth moving in steady passes, and the rain outside maintains its patient accompaniment. Sometimes a drop of water, dislodged from the roof, falls into the drainage channel with a soft musical pling, and then the steady drumming reasserts itself, and you continue without pause. When all the lames have been wiped clean, you gather the used cloths and place them in the bamboo basket, then take up a fresh dry cloth and go over each lame one more time, buffing away any residual moisture until the metal is uniformly matte and dry. The lames now lie on their clean cloth in 2 neat rows, their surfaces ready for the polishing stone, and you allow yourself a brief rest, your hands resting on your knees, your eyes moving over the orderly arrangement of the pieces. The workshop is warm and still, the lamplight steady, the scent of damp clay and old silk filling the air, and you breathe slowly, letting the calm of the work settle into your body. Now you reach for the polishing stone you will use on these small pieces, a stone shaped like a rounded stick, a sliver of the same fine finishing stone that you used on the chest plate, but smaller and easier to handle. It fits into your palm like a thick pen, its surface warms smooth from long use, and you moisten it with a drop of water before picking up the first lame, the broad shoulder cap from the left guard. You hold the lame in your left hand, supporting it on your fingertips, and with your right hand you bring the stone to the metal, beginning a series of light rhythmic strokes that follow the curve of the piece. The stone's sound is a soft, rasping whisper, and the slurry that forms is faint and dark, wiped away after every few strokes with a corner of the dry cloth. The metal responds slowly, its matte grey giving way to a deeper, more refined tone, and you work the entire surface of the lame outer and inner faces before setting it aside and picking up the next. The task is repetitive to the point of meditation, 34 lames each receiving the same patient treatment, the same light strokes, the same soft rasp of stone on iron. You move through the left guard's set, and then the right, your hand growing accustomed to the weight and shape of each piece, the polishing becoming so automatic that your mind drifts into a quiet, restful space where only the sound of the stone and the sound of the rain exist. The lamplight catches the edges of the already polished lames, creating a soft, orderly row of gentle reflections on the clean cloth, and the scent of the stone, cool and mineral, mingles with the lingering clove oil from the chest plate. A quiet, pleasant combination. The night continues, deep and still, and the shoulder guards, piece by piece, begin to take on the same tranquil glow that now graces the helmet and the chest plate. A glow that speaks of care and patience and the slow, steady passage of hours in the rain-soaked dark. The last of the shoulder guard lames now rests on the clean cloth beside its companions, its surface polished to a deep, subdued grey that matches the 33 pieces arranged in neat rows before you. The polishing stone, shaped like a rounded stick, has been wiped clean and returned to its place on the shelf, and the faint mineral scent of the slurry has begun to fade from the air. You have been working for a long, unbroken stretch, and the night outside the workshop has reached its deepest hour, that still, quiet interval when the darkness seems to press closest against the walls, and even the rain softens its voice. The steady drumming on the roof which has accompanied you since the first drops fell has eased into a fine, silent drizzle that you can no longer hear as distinct drops, but still sense in the freshness of the air seeping through the shutter, slats, a cool, clean presence that carries the smell of wet earth and soaked cedar wood. The oil lamps continue to burn with their tall, unwavering flames, though one of them, the lamp on the far shelf, has begun to flicker very slightly, its wick in need of a small adjustment that you will attend to later. You place your hands on your knees and take a long, slow breath, letting your shoulders drop and your spine relax against the gentle curve of your posture. A mild stiffness has settled into your lower back from the hours of sitting, and a warm, dull ache has taken up residence in your forearms and the joints of your fingers, the honest fatigue of sustained, careful work. It is not an uncomfortable feeling, but rather a reminder that the night has passed through many quiet measures, and that your body, like the armor, benefits from occasional rest. You decide that this is the moment for a small break, a brief pause to let your muscles ease and your eyes look upon something other than iron and silk. You rise from the cushion slowly, uncurling your legs with care, feeling the straw matting give slightly under your weight. The movement brings a pleasant stretch to your knees and ankles, and you stand for a moment in the center of the workshop, letting your arms hang loose at your sides. The armor stands before you, the helmet and chest plate gleaming softly in the lamplight, their oiled surfaces holding the glow in a tranquil, dark shimmer. The shoulder guard lames wait on their cloth, arranged with the precision of a patient scribe, and the silk cords lie coiled on the cotton tray in loops of faded indigo and dusty rose. Everything is in its place, and the room is peaceful and still. You turn and walk toward the small wooden tray that sits on a low shelf near the door, the tray you prepared earlier in the evening without knowing exactly when you would need it. On the tray rests a simple ceramic cup with a plain grey glaze, and beside it a small earthenware pot with a fitted lid, its sides still faintly warm to the touch. You lift the lid, and a soft wisp of steam rises into the air, carrying the mild, nutty scent of barley tea that has been steeping slowly, losing its heat but retaining its flavor. The tea was poured from a larger kettle hours ago, before the rain began, and it is cooled to a temperature that is just right for drinking without hurry, not hot enough to scald, but still warm enough to comfort. You pour the tea into the cup with a slow, steady hand, watching the pale amber liquid settle, its surface catching the lamplight in a faint, trembling gleam. With the cup in hand, you do not return to your cushion immediately, but instead walk to the shuttered window on the far side of the workshop, the one that looks out onto the tiny garden behind the building. The shutters are made of thin wooden slats fitted into a frame, and they are closed against the night, but small gaps between the slats allow glimpses of the world outside, and let the cooled, rain-washed air seep through. You stand before the shutters, sipping the barley tea in slow, measured mouthfuls, the liquid warm and slightly toasty on your tongue, and you listen to the near-silent whisper of the drizzle as it settles onto the leaves of the garden plants. The tea has a gentle, earthy flavor, a taste of roasted grains and patience, and it spreads a pleasant warmth through your chest and stomach, easing the slight chill that has settled into your skin from the long hours of sitting still. Through the gaps in the shutters you can see almost nothing, only the faintest suggestion of movement where the drizzle beads on the edge of a wooden rain gutter and falls in slow, irregular drips. But you can smell the garden clearly now. The wet soil and the green scent of the single maple tree that grows beside the stone basin, its leaves heavy with moisture, its branches barely visible as dark as shapes against the deep grey of the night sky. The drizzle is so fine that it makes no sound of its own, only the occasional soft patter of a collected droplet falling from leaf to leaf, a sound so quiet that you might be imagining it. The world outside is entirely still, wrapped in the deep hush of the night's heart, and you stand there for a long restful interval, letting the tea warm your hands and the silence fill your thoughts. When the cup is empty, you lower it to the tray and stand for a moment longer, stretching your shoulders back in a slow, careful roll, feeling the stiffness in your upper back release by gradual degrees. You lift your arms and rotate your wrists, the joints making small, quiet pops that are audible only to you, and then you let your hands fall back to your sides, the ache in your forearms now diminished to a faint, distant warmth. The break has done its work, and you feel ready to return to the cushion and continue the night's labor, your body refreshed, your mind calm and clear. You walk back to the work area, pausing at the shelf to adjust the flickering lamp. The wick has burned down a little, and has developed a small charred curl at its tip, which you trim with a pair of small iron snips kept in a niche beside the lamp. The flame steadies immediately, rising tall and bright once more, and the shadows in that corner of the room retreat. You return the snips to their niche, and then turn your attention to the next piece of armor that awaits your care. On the armor stand, hanging from a small hook below the helmet, is the mempo, the face guard. It is a half-mask made of iron, shaped to cover the lower half of a face from the nose down to the chin, with a small flared section that would protect the throat. The iron has been lacquered in a deep, reddish brown that matches the chest plate, though the lacquer here is in better condition, having been shielded from the elements by the helmet's brim. The cheeks of the mask are textured with fine, parallel grooves that give the surface a subtle, rippling quality, and the nose is a simple, elegant curve that ends in a small, slightly upturned tip. Below the nose, attached to the iron with tiny brass pins, is a short moustache made of dark horsehair, its bristles stiff and glossy, carefully trimmed into a shape that suggests dignity and composure. The interior of the mask is lined with a layer of soft leather that has been dyed a deep, muted red, and two small cords of braided silk extend from the sides, meant to tie the mask to the helmet. You lift the mempo from its hook with both hands, supporting its weight with care, and carry it to your cushion. The mask is lighter than the helmet, but heavier than it looks, the iron dense and cool against your palms. You settle it into your lap, the outer face upward, and the lamplight plays across the grooved cheeks and the curve of the nose, revealing a fine layer of dust that has settled into the recesses of the lacquer. The horsehair moustache is clean, but slightly disarranged, a few bristles sticking out of alignment, and the brass pins that hold it in place show a faint greenish patina of age. The leather lining inside gives off a soft, musky scent, and the silk cords are slightly frayed at their ends but otherwise strong. The work on the mempo will be especially gentle because the lacquered surface cannot be polished with stones, and the horsehair moustache must be treated with the lightest possible touch. You begin by taking up the soft horsehair brush, the same one you used to dust the silk lacing of the shoulder guards, and you sweep it across the outer face of the mask with feather-light strokes. The brush glides over the lacquered grooves, lifting away the dust without scratching the surface, and the bristles make a faint, rustling whisper that is almost inaudible. You work the brush into the crevices around the nose and along the edges where the lacquer meets the bare iron rim, taking your time, ensuring that every particle of dust is lifted away. The mustache requires a different approach. You set the brush aside and take up a dry cotton swab, a small stick of bamboo around which a wisp of cotton has been wound and tied with a thread. You touch the swab to the horsehair with the gentlest possible pressure, using a light rolling motion that lifts away any dust without pulling at the bristles. The horsehair is surprisingly soft, each strand smooth and slightly springy, and the swab glides over them with a quiet tickling sound. You work from the center of the moustache outward, following the natural sweep of the hair, and soon the bristles are aligned and gleaming, their dark, glossy surface catching the lamplight. The brass pins, now more visible, show a faint patina that you decide to leave as it is, a natural sign of age that does not detract from the mask's dignity. Next you turn your attention to the bare iron areas of the mempo, the metal sections that have not been lacquered. These include the inner rim, the nose tip, and the small chin plate below the moustache. You take up a fresh, dry cotton cloth and fold it into a small pad. Then you buff the iron gently in slow, circular motions, removing any trace of old oil or tarnish. The iron responds quickly, taking on a subdued, clean gray that matches the other polished pieces, though you do not use any stone or powder on these small areas. Only the cloth, which is enough to refresh the surface without disturbing the adjacent lacquer. The cloth catches on the edge of the nose tip with a soft ticking sound, and you work around it carefully, your fingers steady and patient. The interior leather lining is clean next, and for this you use completely dry, clean cotton square, folded into a small pad that fits inside the mask. You press the cloth gently against the leather, blotting rather than rubbing, absorbing any moisture or dust that may have accumulated. The leather is soft and supple, its red dye still rich in the deeper creases, and the cloth comes away only slightly darkened, a sign that the lining was not heavily soiled. You take a second dry cloth and repeat the blotting, and this time the cloth remains clean, so you set it aside and consider the lining finished. The silk cords that tie the mask to the helmet are the final part of the cleaning. You lift one cord and run it gently between your thumb and forefinger, feeling the braided texture, the slight fuzziness of the older silk. The cord is a faded indigo, and it has retained its strength despite its age. You take the soft brush and sweep it along the length of the cord, from the knot at the mask's edge to the frayed tip, lifting away any dust that has settled into the braid. The sound of the brush on the silk is a soft, whisking whisper, and you repeat the process with the second cord, taking your time, letting the motion settle into a slow, calming rhythm. When the cleaning is complete, you lift the mempo and hold it up to the lamp, turning it slowly to examine every surface. The lacquer glows with a deep, quiet richness, the grooves catching the light in a series of fine, parallel lines. The moustache is smooth and orderly, the brass pins gleaming faintly. The iron areas have a clean, subdued sheen, and the leather lining looks fresh and dry. The mask has a calm, composed expression, the face of a guardian at rest, and you feel a quiet satisfaction as you place it back onto its hook on the armor stand, where it hangs below the helmet, waiting to be reunited with the rest of the armor. The break and the gentle work on the mempo have shifted the knight's tempo into something even slower and more peaceful than before. The drizzle outside continues its fine, silent descent, and the air in the workshop is cool and fresh, carrying the mingled scents of barley tea, old leather, and the faint, lingering spice of clove oil. You stand by the armor, stand for a moment, looking at the pieces you have cared for, the helmet above, the chest plate below, the mempo hanging between them, and the rows of polished lames waiting on their cloth. The night is deep, but the work is not yet finished, and you feel no hurry, only the quiet readiness to continue whenever the moment feels right. You return to your cushion, settle yourself comfortably, and reach for the next piece, letting the calm of the workshop hold you in its steady, lamplit embrace. The polished lames of the shoulder guards rest in their orderly rows on the clean cotton cloth, their surfaces holding the lamplight in a subdued, even shimmer that matches the helmet and the chest plate. The silk cords lie coiled on the cotton tray beside them, loops of faded indigo and dusty crimson that have waited patiently through the long hours of polishing, their patterns of threading still intact, their knots undone but remembered. The leather backing panels rest nearby, dark and stiff, their surfaces brushed clean and ready to receive the metal once more. The rain outside has softened further, its earlier drumming now reduced to a fine, silent drizzle that you can feel more than hear, a cool presence in the air that slips through the shutter slats and mingles with the warmth of the oil lamps. The night has passed its deepest point, and has begun the slow, imperceptible turn toward dawn, though the darkness outside remains complete, and the clouds show no sign of breaking. You seat yourself on the cushion and draw the cotton tray closer, positioning it so that the lames and cords are within easy reach. The work of reassembly is a different kind of task from the polishing, less physical but equally demanding of patience, requiring a steady hand and an eye for the precise alignment of small things. You take a moment to settle your posture, your spine straight but relaxed, your breathing slow and even, and then you reach for the spool of fresh silk lacing that waits on the shelf. The spool is a small wooden cylinder around which a length of new silk cord has been wound, its color a subdued indigo that closely matches the original lacing, chosen to blend with the faded cords rather than replace them entirely. You will use this new silk only where the old cords are frayed beyond use, preserving as much of the original material as possible, a practice that respects the armor's age and history. Beside the spool, you take up the large-eyed wooden needle that is used for lacing. The needle is made of smooth, polished bamboo, its tip blunted so that it will not catch on the silk or scratch the metal, and its eye is an elongated slot through which the cord passes easily. You unroll a length of the new silk cord, measuring it against your forearm in a practiced gesture that yields the correct span for a single vertical row of lames, and then you cut it with a small pair of shears kept in the workbench drawer. The cord is smooth and slightly springy, its fibers tight and even, and it slides through the needle's eye with a soft, rustling whisper. You set the threaded needle aside on a clean cotton square and turn your attention to the leather backing panel of the left shoulder guard, which you lift onto your lap, its outer face downward and its inner face, with its rows of small holes, turned up to the lamplight. The lames must be reattached in the exact order of their removal, from the smallest at the bottom to the broadest at the top, and you begin by picking up the lowest lame, the narrowest of the 17, from its place on the cloth. You hold it in your left hand, feeling its cool weight and the smooth, polished texture of its surface, and you align it with the bottom edge of the leather panel, matching the holes in the metal to the corresponding holes in the leather. The alignment is precise, the holes lining up with a natural ease that speaks to the skill of the original maker, and you thread the needle through the first hole from the back of the leather, drawing the silk cord through with a slow, steady pull. The cord makes a faint swishing sound as it passes through the leather and then through the iron, and you leave a small tail of cord at the back, enough to tie a securing knot later. You guide the needle through the next hole, this one offsets slightly to create the alternating pattern of the lacing, and then through the corresponding hole in the leather, drawing the cord snug but not tight, allowing just enough slack for the lame to shift and flex. The silk glides through the holes with a smooth, fluid motion, and the metal settles against the leather with a soft, faintly audible tap, the sound of one piece finding its proper place. You work the needle through the remaining holes of the first lame, following the threading pattern that the old cords established, and when the lame is fully attached, you tie a small flat knot at the back of the leather, pulling it gently until it sits flush against the surface. The knot is a simple loop drawn tight, its ends trimmed to a short, neat length, and it holds the lame securely while allowing the necessary movement. The second lame is lifted next, slightly broader than the first, and you position it above its companion so that it overlaps by a precise margin, the lower edge of the second lame resting just above the upper edge of the first. The overlap is crucial, for it ensures that the shoulder guard will flex properly and that no gap will appear between the lames when the armor is worn. You adjust the position by eye, checking the alignment against the leather panel's edge, and then you thread the needle through the first hole, beginning the same steady, repetitive process. The silk cord passes through the metal with that same soft swishing sound, and the lame settles into its overlap with a quiet metallic tick that joins the faint whisper of the drizzle outside. You continue working upward through the rows of lames, each piece adding to the growing assembly, the shoulder guard slowly regaining its familiar tapered shape. The motion of threading the needle, drawing the cord, and tying the knots becomes a steady, meditative rhythm, your hands moving with the ease of long practice, your mind drifting into the same calm, focused state that carried you through the polishing. The lamplight catches the polished edges of the lames as you work, creating a series of soft, linear gleams that shift and shimmer with each new addition, and the scent of the fresh silk, a faint, clean smell like dry grass, mingles with the lingering spice of the clove oil. When you reach the uppermost lame, the broad shoulder cap, you pause to examine the alignment of the entire assembly. The lames hang in a smooth, even cascade, their overlaps uniform, their edges parallel to the leather panel's sides. The old silk cords, still attached to the lames, weave through the new ones in a pattern that blends the original and the replacement into a harmonious whole. The slight difference in color between old and new barely perceptible in the lamplight. You thread the final knots with particular care, ensuring that the shoulder cap is firmly attached and that its weight is evenly distributed across the leather panel. Then you tie off the last knot, trim the cord ends, and lift the completed shoulder guard to examine it in the full light of the lamp. The left shoulder guard is whole again, its polished lames gleaming softly, its silk lacing fresh and secure, its leather backing strong and clean. You turn it over in your hands, checking the knots at the back, and you see that they are all flat and tight, with no loose ends or twisted cords. The guard has a quiet, dignified presence, its metal holding the lamplight in a tranquil shimmer that speaks of the hours of care you have given it. You place it carefully on the straw matting beside your cushion, where it will wait while you assemble its companion. You lift the right shoulder guard's leather backing panel onto your lap and begin the same process, starting with the lowest lame and working upward. This guard's lames are identical in size and shape to the left ones, and the threading pattern is the same, so the work proceeds with the same steady, unhurried rhythm. Your hands, now thoroughly warmed by the activity, move with an easy, automatic precision, and you find that the time passes without any sense of duration. Each lame attached, each knot tied, each overlap checked and confirmed. The rain outside remains a silent, sensed presence, the drizzle continuing its fine, patient descent, and the oil lamps burn on with their tall, steady flames, their lighter, warm, constant companion. As you work on the right guard, you notice a small difference in the leather, a faint, darkened patch near the middle where some past wear has left a mark. The leather is still sound, the fibers intact, and the mark is only a cosmetic reminder of the armor's long history, so you leave it as it is, threading the silk through the nearby holes, with a little extra care to avoid stressing the area. The lames attach smoothly despite this, and the right shoulder guard takes shape as gracefully as the left, its lames overlapping in a clean, even cascade, its cords drawing the assembly into a flexible, unified whole. When the last lame is attached and the final knots tied, you lift the right shoulder guard and examine it in the lamplight, turning it slowly to check every detail. The polished metal gleams with the same subdued luster as its companion. The silk lacing is tidy and secure, and the leather backing, though marked in one spot, is clean and strong. You place the right guard beside the left on the straw matting, and for a moment you simply look at the pair, their matched curves and gleaming surfaces, a quiet testament to the work of the night. Now you turn your attention back to the chest plate, which hangs on its peg on the main armor stand, waiting to be reunited with its shoulder straps. You rise from the cushion carrying the left shoulder guard with you, and you lift the chest plate from its peg, supporting its weight in your left arm, while your right hand positions the guard against the upper edge. The leather backing panel of the guard has two small loops at its top, and these loops fit over the iron rings that are mounted on the chest plate's upper rim. You slide the first loop over its ring, then the second, and the shoulder guard settles into place with a soft, leathery rustle, its lames draping downward in a smooth, natural fall. You adjust the alignment slightly, centering the guard on the shoulder area, and then you step back to confirm that it hangs correctly. The right shoulder guard is attached in the same way, its loops fitted over the iron rings, its lames falling into place beside the chest plate's curve. With both guards attached, the armor begins to look complete again, its upper portion now fully assembled, the helmet above, the mempo below it, the chest plate in the center, and the shoulder guards extending to either side like the folded wings of a resting bird. The lamplight plays across the entire assembly, and you see how the polished surfaces reflect the light in a unified tranquil glow, the different pieces sharing the same deep subdued shimmer. You reach for the leather shoulder straps that you set aside earlier in the night, the two lengths of darkened leather with their bone toggles and silk cords. The toggles still rest in their ceramic dish on the workbench, and you retrieve them now, fitting each toggle back into its leather loop and retying the silk cord with the same careful knots that held them before. The cords are slightly stiff from being unworked for hours, but they yield to your fingers and the knots tighten into their familiar, compact forms. You attach the straps to the iron rings at the top of the shoulder guards, threading the leather through and securing it with a simple, sturdy hitch that will hold the armor in place when it is worn. With the shoulder straps reattached, the upper half of the armor is now fully assembled and ready. You step back from the stand, letting your hands fall to your sides, and you look at the work you have accomplished. The helmet, the mempo, the chest plate, and the shoulder guards all wait in the lamplight, their surfaces glowing with the same dark, quiet luster, their silk cords and leather straps clean and secure. The scent of clove oil, fresh silk, and old leather mingles in the air, and the rain, still falling as a fine, silent drizzle, wraps the workshop in its cool, patient embrace. You take a long, slow breath, feeling the calm of the moment settle into your bones, and then you turn to the remaining pieces of the armor, the arm guards and the thigh protectors, which wait on their shelf for their turn in the quiet hours that remain before dawn. The armor stands before you now as a unified whole, its upper portion fully assembled and gleaming in the steady lamplight. The helmet rests atop the stand, its iron bowl holding a deep, subdued luster, the mempo hanging below it with its lacquered cheeks and orderly horsehair moustache. The chestplate curves outward from the central peg, its oiled surface a tranquil dark shimmer, and the shoulder guards extend to either side, their polished lames cascading in smooth overlapping rows bound by fresh indigo silk. The leather straps hang from the iron rings, their bone toggles secure, their knots tidy and firm. The armor has regained its dignity through the long hours of the night, and now only the final stage remains, a last, gentle buffing of every exposed metal surface that will bring the entire assembly to its completed calm. You have already returned the arm guards and thigh protectors to their places on the stand, small assemblies of metal plates and silk cord that you cleaned and polished earlier in the night, their surfaces now matching the deeper tone of the larger pieces. The rain outside, which has been a steady companion since the first drops fell on the clay-tiled roof, has undergone another of its subtle shifts, easing from the fine, silent drizzle of the deep night into something even gentler. A moisture that hangs in the air more than it falls, a mist so fine that it no longer makes any sound at all against the shutters. The silence that settles in its wake is not a true silence, but a soft, breathy stillness, the kind of quiet that seems to hold its breath, waiting for the next change. The oil lamps continue to burn with their tall, unwavering flames, their light a warm, constant presence, and the workshop is filled with the mingled scents of clove oil, polished iron, old leather, and the fresh, wet earth smell that drifts through the shutter slats. You take up the length of raw silk that you reserved for this final buffing, a rectangle of fabric cut from a larger bolt and kept folded on the shelf, untouched until now. The raw silk is different from the fine, smooth squares you used for the earlier polishing. It has a slightly nubbly texture, a surface that is not rough, but has a subtle, irregular grain that catches the light in tiny, scattered points. When you rub it between your fingers, you feel a gentle, pleasant friction, and you know that it will lift away any last trace of oil or dust, while leaving the metal with a soft, satin-like finish. You fold the silk into a pad that fits comfortably in your palm, smoothing out the creases with a press of your thumb, and then you step close to the armor stand, ready to begin the slow, methodical journey from the top of the armor to the bottom. The helmet is where you start, because it is the highest piece, and because the work has always moved from top to bottom, a natural progression that feels right in a way that is hard to explain but easy to follow. You reach up and lift the kabuto from its place on the stand, cradling it in your left arm, while your right hand brings the silk pad to the brow plate. The contact is light, a mere resting of the fabric on the metal, and then you begin to move the pad in long, sweeping strokes that follow the horizontal curve of the plate. The raw silk drags slightly against the iron, producing a very faint, velvety whisper, and the metal beneath it takes on a subtle, quiet glow that is not a shine but a depth, a settled calm that seems to come from within. You work the pad across the entire brow plate, then around the sides, then over the back, each stroke overlapping the previous one by a small margin. The motions slow and deliberate, your breathing matching the steady rhythm of your hand. The silk pad, as it moves, picks up no visible residue, for the helmet is already clean and oiled, but you can feel the surface becoming smoother under your touch, the microscopic texture of the iron yielding to the gentle friction. You turn the helmet in your hands, checking the areas around the rivets and the rim, and you buff those with the edge of the pad, using tiny, careful strokes that reach into the crevices without disturbing the metal's grain. The lamplight plays across the ball as you turn it, sliding along the curves in a smooth, unbroken wave, and you see that the finish is exactly what you intended, not bright or reflective, but deep and quiet. A surface that seems to absorb the light and hold it. When the helmet is fully buffed, you place it back onto the stand, positioning it carefully so that it faces forward, its brow plate aligned with the chest plate below. Then you move to the mempo, lifting it from its hook and holding it in your palm, the face guard small and light compared to the helmet. The raw silk touches the lacquered cheeks first, and use a lighter pressure here, barely grazing the surface so that you do not dull the textured grooves. The silk moves over the lacquer with a soft whispering sound, and you work around the nose, under the chin, and along the edges where the lacquer meets the bare iron rim, the pad conforming to the curves with an easy, natural give. The horsehair mustache you avoid entirely, for it has already been cleaned and aligned, and instead you buff the small iron chin plate below it, using the very tip of the folded silk to reach the narrow space. The moustache bristles, dark and glossy, catch the lamplight and hold it in a series of tiny gleaming points, and the brass pins that secure them have a faint, quiet glow that you leave undisturbed. The chest plate comes next, and you do not remove it from the stand, but work on it where it hangs, moving the silk pad across its broad, curved surface in long, sweeping passes that follow the horizontal grain of the iron. The sound is that same velvety whisper, a soft, regular hush that fills the silence left by the rain. You start at the top, near the iron rings, and work downward, covering the entire outer face, the pad gliding over the oiled metal with a smooth, frictionless ease that tells you the surface is as refined as it can be. The areas where the old lacquer remains, those faded patches of deep russet, you buff with a slightly lighter touch, preserving their texture while blending them into the overall finish. The transition between lacquer and polished iron is seamless now, a quiet harmony of materials that speaks to the care you have given. You move around to the sides of the chest plate, buffing the curved sections where the shoulder guards attach, and then you reach inside to buff the inner iron rings and the bare metal edges, using the folded edge of the silk pad to reach the narrow spaces. The lamplight catches the rings as you work, and they gleam with a subdued silvery tone that stands out against the darker iron. When the chest plate is complete, you let the silk pad rest for a moment while you examine your work, your eyes traveling across the surface in a slow, methodical sweep, and you see nothing that requires further attention, only the tranquil, settled glow of metal that has been properly cared for. The shoulder guards are next, and you work on each one separately, starting with the left. The lames, stacked in their overlapping rows, each require an individual pass of the silk, and you bend slightly at the waist to bring your eyes level with the guard, your hand moving the pad in short, horizontal strokes that follow the curve of each lame. The silk whispers against the polished iron, and the lames respond by taking on an even deeper, more unified shimmer, their surfaces blending together into a single harmonious cascade. You work from the top lame down to the bottom, then you turn the guard slightly to buff the edges where the raw iron is visible between the silk cords. The cords themselves, new indigo and old, you brush lightly with the silk pad, just enough to remove any dust that may have settled during assembly, and the colors seem to brighten slightly under the attention. The right shoulder guard receives the same care, the same steady, patient passes of the silk, and when both are finished, you step back and look at the pair. They hang from the chest plate with a natural, balanced grace, their lames gleaming softly, their silk cords neat and orderly, their leather straps dark and secure. The armor is now very close to complete, and you feel a quiet, unhurried readiness to finish the final pieces. The arm guards, small assemblies of narrow metal splints laced together with silk, hang from the lower pegs of the armor, stand, and you lift each one in turn, buffing the splints with the raw silk pad, using gentle vertical strokes that follow the length of the metal. The splints are light and delicate compared to the larger plates, and you handle them with a corresponding lightness, your touch careful and precise. The silk moves over the metal with a soft ticking sound as it crosses the gaps between the splints, and you work slowly, ensuring that each piece is buffed to the same subdued glow as the rest of the armor. The thigh protectors, which hang below the arm guards, are larger but constructed in the same way, and you buff them with the same patient, vertical strokes, the silk pad conforming to the gentle curve of the plates. When every piece of the armor has been buffed, you stand back from the stand and let the silk pad rest in your hand, its surface now faintly darkened from the microscopic traces of oil it has picked up. The armor in its entirety waits before you in the lamplight, a complete and dignified presence that seems to have absorbed some of the night's stillness into its metal. The helmet, the mempo, the chest plate, the shoulder guards, the arm guards, and the thigh protectors all share the same tranquil finish, a soft, satin-like calm that is the result of many hours of patient work. There is no dramatic transformation, no sudden revelation, only the quiet, steady progression of care that has brought the armor to this moment. You become aware as you stand there that the silence outside the workshop has deepened further. The rain has stopped. The soft, breathy stillness that replaced the drizzle has now given way to a complete quiet, a hush so profound that you can hear the faint, steady hiss of the oil lamp wicks and the soft pad of your own feet on the straw matting. You turn toward the shuttered window on the far side of the room, and after a moment of hesitation, you cross to it, your steps quiet and slow, the silk pad still in your hand. You unlatch the shutter with a simple wooden catch that slides sideways with a soft, dry sound, and you fold one panel inward, just enough to create a narrow opening through which you can see the garden. The cool, rain-washed air flows through the gap immediately, fresh and clean, carrying the scent of wet leaves and damp stone, and you breathe it in deeply, feeling its coolness reach into your lungs. The garden is tiny, no more than a few paces across, but it is complete in itself. A small world of moss-covered stones, a stone water basin, and a single maple tree that grows beside the workshop wall. Every surface is wet, glistening with the moisture of the long rain, and the maple leaves, each one a delicate five-pointed shape, are heavy with droplets that catch the faint pale light that has begun to seep through the thinning clouds. You look upward, and through the gap in the shutters you can see a portion of the night sky. The clouds, which have been thick and unbroken since the evening, are now beginning to separate, their edges softening and pulling apart to reveal a sliver of moon, a pale bone-white crescent that hangs in the darkness like a quiet, distant lantern. The moon is thin and clear, its light barely enough to cast shadows, but it glows with a steady, gentle radiance that seems to bless the wet garden, turning the droplets on the maple leaves into tiny silver points. The sight is not dramatic, not the kind of scene that would inspire exclamation or wonder, but it is calm and beautiful in its simplicity, and you stand at the open shutter for a long, restful moment, letting the cool air wash over your face and the pale moonlight fill your eyes. There is no sound from the garden, no rustle of leaves or chirp of insects, only the profound, soaking quiet of the earth after a long rain. The water basin is full to overflowing, a thin sheet of water spilling over its lip and running down the mossy stone to soak into the ground. The maple tree stands motionless, its branches dark against the lighter sky, its leaves hanging still and heavy. The air is so fresh that it seems to clean something inside you, a quiet renewal that matches the renewal of the armor behind you in the lamplight. You do not linger too long, for the night is not yet over, and the workshop still calls you back to its warmth. You close the shutter gently, sliding the wooden catch back into place with a soft, solid click, and you turn back to the room. The oil lamps burn on, their flames steady and tall, and the armor stands in its full assembly, waiting in the amber glow. You walk back to the stand, and you make one final pass over the entire armor with a fresh, clean section of the silk pad, a last feather-light buffing that removes any dust that may have settled during the brief opening of the shutter. The silk moves across the helmet, the mempo, the chest plate, the guards and the protectors in a slow, continuous motion, and when you are finished, you let the pad fall to your side and you simply stand before the armor, your hands resting at your waist, your breathing slow and deep. The armor is complete. The night is still, and the pale sliver of moon, though hidden now by the closed shutters, continues its quiet passage across the clearing sky, witnessed by no one but the wet leaves and the overflowing stone basin in the tiny garden behind the workshop. The armor stands in its full assembly, every piece in its proper place, every surface holding the lamplight in a quiet, settled glow. The helmet rests above, the mempo below it, the chest plate curving outward, the shoulder guards cascading in their overlapping rows, the arm guards and thigh protectors hanging straight and still. The raw silk pad is still in your hand, its work complete, and you stand before the stand for a long, slow moment, letting your eyes travel across the armor one final time. There is nothing left to polish, nothing left to adjust, no knot to tighten or strap to align. The night's labor has reached its natural end. Outside, the rain has stopped entirely, and the silence that followed it has deepened into a stillness so complete that the workshop itself seems to be resting. The oil lamps burn on, their three flames steady and tall, though the one on the far shelf has begun to flicker again, its fuel running low. You fold the raw silk pad and set it on the workbench. Then you take a step back from the armor stand, your feet making a soft, padded sound on the straw matting. The ache in your forearms and shoulders, which has been a quiet companion through the later hours, now feels less like fatigue and more like the memory of effort, a warm, fading presence that will soothed by rest. You roll your shoulders once, a slow, careful motion, and you feel the muscles loosen, the last tension draining away into the stillness. The workshop, which has held you through the entire night, now seems to be gently suggesting that it is time to close the space, to put the tools to sleep and let the darkness reclaim the room. You begin the closing rituals with the lamps because they have been your companions since the first moment of the night, and it feels right to attend to them first. You walk to the far shelf, where the flickering lamp stands beside the row of polishing powders. The flame dances slightly, its base glowing orange, and you can see that the oil in the reservoir has dropped to a thin, shallow pool. You reach for the small brass snuffer that hangs from a hook on the shelf, a simple cone of metal with a wooden handle, and you lower it gently over the flame. The flame dies without a sound, extinguished in an instant, and a thin wisp of smoke rises from the snuffer's tip, carrying the faint, clean smell of burnt oil. You lift the snuffer away and hang it back on its hook, and the corner of the room falls into a soft, velvety shadow, the darkness there now deeper than before. The second lamp you attend to is the one above the workbench, the one that has provided the brightest light for your close work. Its flame is still tall and steady, and when you bring the snuffer down over it, it too goes out in a silent, seamless moment. The workbench, with its stacked cloths and ceramic dishes, recedes into a dim grey twilight, the shapes of the objects still visible, but no longer distinct. The scent of the extinguished wick drifts across the room, a faint, smoky note that mingles with the lingering spice of clove oil and the fresh, damp air from the garden. You replace the snuffer and turn to the third lamp, the one that hangs above the armor stand, and you leave it burning, its flame tall and bright, a single point of warmth in the gathering dimness. This lamp will remain lit until the very last moment, a companion for the final tasks. With 2 of the 3 lamps extinguished, the workshop has changed its character. The shadows have grown longer and softer, pooling in the corners and stretching across the floor, and the remaining light falls in a warm, concentrated pool around the armor stand. The polished surfaces of the armor catch this light and hold it, the metal seeming to glow from within, and the rest of the room fades into a gentle, indistinct darkness. It is a peaceful transformation, a slow settling into rest, and you move through it with the same calm, unhurried pace that has carried you through the entire night. Your next task is to gather the used cloths. You walk to the bamboo basket beside the workbench, the basket that has been slowly filling through the hours, and you lift it with both hands, feeling its light, springy weight. The cloths inside are stained with old oil, grey slurry, and the faint golden traces of clove oil, and they carry the mingled smells of the night's work. You carry the basket to the shelf and set it down near the door, where it will be easy to retrieve in the morning when you take it to the water basin for washing. The cloths will be soaped and scrubbed and hung to dry in the sun, but that is a task for another time, a daytime task, and for now they can rest as they are. Next, you turn your attention to the polishing stones. The coarse whetstone, the fine finishing stone, and the small finger stone all lie on their bamboo mat beside the workbench, each one still faintly damp from its last use. You take up a clean, damp cloth from the stack, a cloth that has not been used for polishing, and you wipe each stone carefully, removing the last traces of slurry and metal dust. The coarse stone feels rough and gritty under the cloth, the fine stone smooth and cool, the finger stone delicate and slender. You work the cloth into the corners and edges of each stone, and then you dry them with a fresh cotton square, buffing them until they are clean and dry to the touch. The stones have a quiet, solid presence, and you place them back on the shelf in their designated spots, the coarse one on the left, the fine one in the center, the finger stone on the right, each wrapped in its strip of protective cotton. The ceramic dishes and the small bowl of water are attended to next. You lift the dish that held the Uchiko powder and examine it, but the powder inside is still clean and dry, its lid having been replaced earlier, so you simply return it to its place on the shelf. The clove oil bottle, with its cork stopper firmly seated, goes back into its shallow dish, and the small ceramic plate that held the oil pool is wiped clean with a dry cloth, the faint golden residue lifting away easily. The water bowl, which has been used throughout the night, is now half empty, its surface still and clear. You carry it to the door, slide the wooden latch, and open the shutter just enough to pour the water out onto the packed earth of the front step. The water landing with a soft, splashing sound that is quickly absorbed by the wet ground. You then wipe the bowl dry and place it back on the shelf upside down so that it will stay clean until its next use. The workbench itself is cleared and wiped. You take a damp cloth and pass it over the wooden surface, removing any dust or powder that may have settled there during the night. The wood, which is a pale honey-colored cedar, gleams faintly under the cloth, and the scent of the damp cedar rises briefly, a clean, resinous smell that mingles with the other scents in the room. You arrange the remaining clean cloths into a neat stack, place the wooden tweezers back in their tray, and set the ceramic cup, from which you drank the barley tea earlier, onto a small shelf near the door where it can be washed in the morning. The workshop, which has been a place of quiet industry, is now returning to its state of orderly rest, every tool in its appointed place, every surface clean and ready. The armor itself requires no further attention, but you find yourself drawn back to it, standing before the stand in the pool of lamplight. The helmet, the mempo, the chest plate, the guards, all gleam with that same subdued, tranquil luster, and the silk cords, new and old, hang in orderly, parallel lines. The armor is a complete and dignified presence, a thing that has been cared for with patience and respect, and you feel a quiet sense of completion, not pride, but a gentle, settled satisfaction as you look upon it. You reach out and touch the chest plate with the back of your fingers, feeling the cool, smooth surface, the microscopic texture of the oiled iron, and then you let your hand fall back to your side. The armor will wait here in the darkness until it is needed again, and that thought is a comforting one. Now you turn to the small ewer of fresh water that has been sitting on a low shelf near the door, its ceramic sides beaded with condensation. You lift the ewer and pour a small stream of water into the ceramic cup that held the barley tea, rinsing it clean, the water swirling and then stilling. You pour the rinse water out through the same shutter opening, then set the cup aside. With the ewer still in hand, you pour a little water into your cupped palm and splash it gently onto your face. The coolness a pleasant, refreshing shock against your skin, washing away the faint, invisible film of dust and oil that has settled there during the night. You dry your face with a clean corner of the handcloth that hangs from your sash, and the cool water leaves your skin feeling clean and awake, ready for the short walk to your resting place. The final lamp still burns above the armor stand, its flame tall and steady, the last point of light in the room. You stand before it, looking at the armor one more time, memorizing the way the light falls across the helmet's brow plate and the chest plate's curve, the way the shoulder guards shimmer in their overlapping rows. The armor, in this single remaining glow, seems almost to breathe, the metal holding the warmth of the flame, the shadows soft and deep around it. You take a slow breath, letting the stillness fill you, and then you reach for the snuffer one last time. The snuffer is cool in your hand, its brass surface smooth and slightly tarnished from years of use. You lift it carefully, positioning it above the lamp's chimney, and then you lower it in a single, unhurried motion. The flame vanishes without a flicker, extinguished so quickly that the darkness seems to rush in from all sides, filling the room in an instant. The wisp of smoke that follows is barely visible, a pale, curling thread that rises and then fades, and the scent of the extinguished wick drifts across the room, a final, faint note of the night's work. The workshop is now entirely dark, or nearly so, for a faint, grey light has begun to seep through the gaps in the shutters, the first pale hint of the approaching dawn. You stand in the darkness for a moment, letting your eyes adjust, and the shapes of the room slowly emerge from the grey twilight. The armor stand is a darker silhouette against the far wall, the armor itself a collection of deeper shadows, and the workbench and shelves are soft, indistinct forms. The silence is profound, a deep, restful quiet, broken only by the occasional irregular drip of water falling from the roof's edge into the drainage basin outside, a sound that has become so familiar that it feels like a part of the silence itself. The drip falls, pauses, falls again, a slow, diminishing rhythm that marks the last of the rain leaving the tiles, and you listen to it for a while, letting it count out the final moments of the night. You move toward the door, your feet finding the straw matting by touch and memory, and you slide the inner door open with a soft, wooden sound, the frame gliding smoothly in its track. Beyond the workshop, the small anteroom is dark and still, and you step through, turning back to look at the workshop one last time. The room is peaceful, its tools and materials all in order, the armor standing in its silent vigil, and you feel a quiet gratitude for the hours you have spent there. You slide the door closed, the wood meeting the frame with a gentle, solid thud, and the workshop is sealed away, ready to wait through the day until the next night's work begins. In the anteroom, you remove your work sash and hang it on a wooden peg. Then you slip off your indoor sandals and place them side by side on the stone step. The air here is cooler than in the workshop, and you can feel the dampness of the early morning seeping through the walls, a cool, fresh presence that carries the scent of wet earth and washed leaves. You walk to the outer door, unlatch it, and slide it open just enough to step outside, and the world greets you with a soft grey light that is neither night nor day, that pale transitional glow that comes just before the sun rises. The street beyond the workshop is empty and still, the merchant houses and storefronts still shuttered, the paper lantern that swung from the pole across the lane now dark and wet, its flame long extinguished. The packed earth of the street is dark with moisture, puddled in the low spots, and the air is cool and clean, washed fresh by the long rain. You can hear, very faintly, the first distant call of a bird, a single, tentative note that sounds once and then falls silent, as if testing the quiet. The clouds above are thinning, their undersides touched with a pale pearly grey that hints at the sunrise to come, and the sliver of moon that you glimpsed through the shutters is now gone, faded into the brightening sky. You stand on the threshold for a moment, breathing the cool air, letting the quiet of the early morning settle around you. The fatigue of the night is a gentle, pleasant weight, a drowsiness that pulls at your limbs and softens the edges of your thoughts, and you know that it is time to rest. You step back inside, close the outer door with a soft, solid sound, and make your way through the anteroom to the small sleeping chamber that lies beyond. The chamber is simple, a single window covered with a paper screen, a low wooden bed frame with a futon laid out, and a small shelf with a folded blanket. The light through the paper screen is soft and grey, barely illuminating the room, and you move through it quietly, not lighting any lamp, for the dimness is enough. You lie down on the futon, the straw-filled mattress rustling softly under your weight, and you pull the folded blanket over your body. The fabric is cool at first, but quickly warms, and you settle into the comfortable, familiar shape of rest. Your body sinks into the futon, the last of the ache in your muscles fading as you relax, and your breathing slows, deepening into a calm, steady rhythm. Outside, the world is waking slowly, the sky brightening by imperceptible degrees, and somewhere beyond the clouds, the sun is rising, though its light has not yet reached the street. The rain is a memory now, its last drip still falling from the roof's edge in a slow, sporadic pattern, a sound that follows you into the quiet of your rest. You close your eyes, and the images of the night drift through your mind in a slow, peaceful procession. The lamplight on the helmet's brow plate, the dark slurry on the polishing stone, the scent of clove oil rising in the warm air, the neat rows of lames on the cotton tray, the pale sliver of moon through the shutters. They are quiet, gentle images, and they do not demand attention but simply pass, like clouds across a still sky. Your breathing becomes deeper, your body heavier, and the boundary between waking and sleep begins to blur, the sounds of the morning fading into a soft, distant hum. The workshop, sealed in its darkness, holds the armor in its silent embrace, the polished surfaces standing ready in the stillness. The tools rest on their shelves, the cloths wait in their basket, and the oil lamps, now cold, hang from their hooks, their reservoirs empty, their wicks trimmed and clean. the night's work is complete, and the armor polisher, having put the night to rest, now follows it into rest, drifting into a deep, dreamless sleep as the first true light of dawn touches the wet leaves of the maple tree and the overflowing stone basin in the tiny garden behind the workshop.